lifestyle. Sports cards and we live now. Jeremy Lee in the building and every guest that you ever needed. Sports cards after hours keep the hobby heated. Updates, hobby talk like you never seen it. Sports cards live and none could ever beat it. Sports cards is a lifestyle. Sports cards and we live now. Welcome to another episode of Sports Cards Live with your host, Jeremy Lee.
All right, everybody, what is up? Welcome back after a week off. Welcome to episode number 265 of Sports Cards Live. It is Saturday, April the 19th, 2025. My name is Jeremy Lee. Guys, I want to let you all know that tomorrow here on the channel, Fanatics Weekly Auction Watch Party covering all sports is back. It is fun. Join me for that. And Monday here on the channel is MC Monday's showcase style, the big MC sports cards auction each week on eBay. The big monthly one, though, ends this Monday. Tons of action. Please join me and the Crystal Ball, Michael Hathaway, for that coverage, guys. If you're looking to add a grail to your collection, please consider Fund Your Cards, the hobby's leading consolidator. My goodness, they are doing a ton of great work lately, including for yours truly. I'm very excited. Fundyourcards.com. You can check out their proprietary customer platform. You want to fund your grail? They will help you do that, and you can use your cards to fund your grail through Fund Your Cards. Guys, also Mint Inc. I want to shout out Mint Inc., leading hobby brand in Canada. Couple stores in the Toronto area. They do online shopping with worldwide shipping, breaks, grading, trade nights, VIP nights. These guys are doing it all. Their aim is to be the leading hobby brand in Canada, and they are making their mark on the community. Check out mintinc.ca and GP Sports Cards. These guys are a leader in hockey breaks right here on YouTube. They're not on any other platform. They do it on YouTube on Wednesdays and Fridays. Grant Patterson, check out GP Sports Cards. You can also check out their store, their storefront, their bricks and mortar, Total Sports Cards and Collectibles in the greater Toronto area. Guys, if you're looking for a Gem Mint and Sports Stats, Rolling Insights is back, and Ben Hossler from Rolling Insights will be joining us again today. He's been working to make the content he brings that much more relevant and on point for us, and he's cooked something up great for this week, so he will be on with us later on in the night. But you can use Rolling Insights to get your sports stats, box scores all up into the minute for your fantasy sports, your sports betting, whatever it is you're doing, or you just want to do some sports card research. Check out rolling-insights.com today. And guys, Chronosio is the ultimate card inventory manager. 90% accuracy with their state-of-the-art AI autofilling. They've already had tons of cards selling on eBay since 2017. Millions of them, never mind tons, millions of them since 2017. If you only have 100 cards, it might not be for you. But if you've got 1,000, 50,000, even 250,000 cards, Chronosio is the solution for you. Check out home.chronosio with a K spelled just like this. There's the logo right there. Home.chronosio.com, guys. Check them out. And if you'd like to sell your cards on eBay, you want the pros to handle it for you with Slab Sharks, reach out. I can be your Slab Sharks rep, your point of contact, and help you convert your cards into cash to spend on more cards. Hit me up on Instagram, send me a message, an email, anywhere you want, and we can talk about that. Guys, this show and all episodes of Sports Cards Live are available on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen to your podcast. Follow and subscribe for free. Leave a rating or review. Greatly appreciate that. And as always, very grateful for all of our loyal viewers and listeners. If you're not yet subscribed to the YouTube channel here, please take a moment and do so. And tonight, your comments and your questions are still, and as always, in play. That is the plan. We'll see how tonight goes. Let's bring out our co-host from Santa Cruz, California, Mr. Joe Poirot. Welcome back, Joe. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing real good, Jay Lee. And hello, glorious chat. Good to see everybody out there. And looking forward to the show tonight. How are you doing?
I'm good. It's been a crazy couple weeks. We didn't have a show last week, so we took the weekend off, but we are back tonight. I'll be back tomorrow and the next night, as I mentioned in the intro, for the Fanatics Weekly and MC Mondays. And then we've got the Fanatics Premiere Show next Thursday. I'll be doing it from my hotel room in Toronto because next weekend's the Expo. So a good time to let everybody know. And I apologize, but another Saturday, Sunday without any content. Well, from me at least, plenty of other people putting out content for you guys to fill in the gap if you need. But yeah, no Sports Cards Live next Saturday, guys. Want to let you all know that. Wow, the chat is already hopping. Welcome to the show, everybody. Before we get to the chat, Joe, before we bring on our first guest, and we got Iowa Dave coming back on the show. He's put out some great content lately. I sent him a DM. I said, Dave, you're not going to like this, but you've entered legendary status in my mind. Like his most recent, his second last drop to me was the legendary drop. We'll talk about it when he comes on. We got Leighton Sheldon coming back. He was at Strongsville. We've got Mikey Singer joining us just for a short drop in to talk about and pump up the Expo a little bit, with Expo in Toronto coming next week. Josh Madigan from the Hockey Cards Gong Show will be joining us for the first time on Sports Cards Live 2.0. Ben Hossler, as I mentioned, and then our closer, Chris HOJ, will be joining us. I'm sure people are watching the Lakers right now. We got NBA playoffs happening. We've got NHL playoffs happening. It's a great time to be a sports fan. It's a great time to be a card collector. Don't you think?
It certainly is. And I would be struggling a lot more if the Warriors were playing tonight, but they're on tomorrow. But yeah, the Lakers and the T-Wolves, I'm sure people will be slightly distracted, but hopefully not too distracted, because it's a great lineup, and looking forward to a great show.
No doubt. Now, before we get into the show, there were a couple of things I wanted to address. So the first one, I'm just making sure I got my ducks in a row here. The first one, and well, really the maybe even the only one, the most important one is, and just something sad that happened. So this gentleman here, Tim Brommer, passed away this past week. And I saw this post by Dan Vincent on Instagram, and I looked at the picture and I thought, gosh, this guy looks really familiar. And then I read and I realized I'd seen him at several nationals. He had a table. He was a mainstay at the national and other shows in the States as well. And he was like the lone hockey guy at many of these shows. Just hockey was the sign, but a big booth, would be there with his wife. And I think I met him for the first time in Atlantic City, like the first post-pandemic national. And, you know, you just think we take it for granted that we're going to see these guys next time, but we're not going to see him next time. And I'm saddened by that, because I enjoyed talking to him. He was such a nice man. He was open to negotiating. His prices were always fair, and he was always willing to kind of find the right price to make a deal with you. He wanted to make deals. He wanted to have happy customers, super nice and friendly. His wife as well, I believe her name's Patty, as Dan mentions right here. And I think it's important that we talk about this community. And oh, wow, look at this. Jeff McMahon right here says, just got home from Tim's funeral. Oh my goodness. Yes. Wow. Jeff, I'm so glad that Jeff, who's in our chat every Saturday, for years now, that someone in our community, in the Sports Cards Live community here, was at the funeral. That's really nice to hear, Jeff. I didn't know Tim well at all, except for talking to him about hockey cards at the National, starting in 2021, and every National since then. Bought a card or two from him last year in Cleveland. And I think it was the first card I bought at the show last year. And I was looking forward to seeing him and his inventory and his wife. And it's just sad. So I wanted to recognize a member of our community, and just, it's sad. And he's look at this, a young man here. And I don't know what happened, but just very sad to see. So hopefully we can all take a moment and be grateful for what we have here, of course, and pay our respects, and just take a moment to think about Tim Brommer, and a great member of the sports card community. So thank you for allowing me to do that, you guys. In memoriam for Tim. All right. And then it's playoff time. Like I mentioned, we've got NHL playoffs. We've got NBA playoffs. We got the Expo coming up next week. The Nationals around the corner right now. It is an exciting time to be in the hobby, Joe. Now, playoffs wise, we've already had the first game of the NHL playoffs start and finish today. The Winnipeg Jets beat the St. Louis Blues in game one, which the Jets are my second favorite team. So I'm happy to see that happen. How are you feeling about the NBA? Last I looked, the Lakers were a little bit behind in their game, but right, it's a big game. Luke had 16 points and they only had 38 altogether. When I was looking, what are you thinking right now for the basketball playoffs?
Well, the game of the day was the Timberwolves versus the Clippers, which went into overtime. Jokic and the Nuggets managed to prevail and protect home court, but Clippers with Kawhi and Harden definitely present a formidable challenge. But Denver getting that game is pretty big, and I have a feeling if we ask HOJ about it later, he's feeling good about that one. It looks like the T-Wolves may have stretched the lead a little bit. I think they're up 20 now, so Ant-Man is getting busy, and Luka's trying to kind of hold off the route at this point. Game one down there in LA, so maybe the Lakers got a run in him. But I'm feeling excited. My Warriors managed to get in. We made it through a play-in game to get in, and we've got, I think, a reasonably favorable matchup with the Rockets. And I did buy a standing room only ticket for Game 6 in San Francisco if it gets to that. So I'll be there if that nice. Occurs. But it's one of those times where sports fans get your multiple TV screens out is what people will be doing, and set up your own sports bar.
Exactly. I'm looking at the score right now. The Timberwolves are up 23 on the Lakers.
Oh,
with 7.5 minutes left in the third quarter. All right, let's say hello to Jake Dahl. Jake has joined us yet again, as mentioned, Jeff McMahon. Ziggy No, what's going on? Sports Cards is a Lifestyle. Lonely Basement, good evening. Josh Jerez, good to see you back. Linda's First is here. Bob Boozle, what's going on, Bob Boozle? The Rated Rabbi is here. What's up, David? Good to see you. Laura, happy Easter to you and everybody else. Of course, Robert Scott, good evening. Sinjin, bring on the Expo, no doubt. Very excited. Jeff Hart is here. What's up, Jeff? Producer Louis from the Hockey Cards Gong Show. Going to see you in a few days, buddy. Cannot wait. Wesley Collect, what's going on? Mark Santucci's here. Dan's Vintage Baseball was on the show with us 2 weeks ago. What's going on, Dan? Welcome to the show. Mookie Chilson is here. God, I love seeing all these guys. Southern Collector Tony is here as well. Skeppy is present. Good to see you. Orlando is here from a collector's dream. Laura says props to all the Strongsville attendees who filmed those showcases at vintage speed. Greatly appreciate. I found myself pausing a lot watching everybody's Strongsville con. It was great. I want to thank you guys all for that as well. Saw a few cards I would have loved to have been able to inspect in hand. Called Shot Cards, good evening to you. Welcome to the show. Bobby Baseball, good evening. What's going on? Skeppy's confused how Joe's, it's always those same two boats there too, hey? Right, hey, Skeppy, right on. The Professor is here. Good evening to the Professor. Flyer Hawk, what's going on? Kevin Hawthorne from Lakeland, Florida. Good to see ya. David Kaplan is here. What's up, Dave? Good to see you as well. All right. Oh, Chris, CRT is here. What's going on, Chris, guys? Hey. Welcome to the show.
Oh, there was so much. I felt like I practically went to Strongsville, but I mostly just had FOMO from not being there. I think I asked this a couple weeks back. You've never been to Strongsville, have you? No. Okay.
No.
Maybe someday. Maybe someday we'll get there with our vintage lane emerging as it has been lately. Strongsville might be a destination.
You know, so it's funny. Two things I want to say. I want to respond to that with. The first one is, about me going to Strongsville. I want to go. Like I have to go. I feel like it's calling for me. I'll do everything I can to get there next year. I was talking to Mikey Singer last night, who runs it with Steve Menzie, and he's like, "Yeah, you got to come down. It was so great. Like you would love it. Like all the guys were there. You'll love it, And I'm like, I know. I got to go. And then you said, with our vintage lane, which makes me think of Iowa Dave's most recent drop, talking about having a collecting lane. And I haven't told Dave that, maybe we'll have some time to talk about that with him. He's in the back. We're going to bring him on in just a moment. But lanes, collecting lanes, it's a whole other topic of things that we could be talking about for sure. Daniel Brown, what's up? Hugh Janus, welcome. Oh my God, I can't believe I just said that out loud. He got me. He literally got me there. Welcome to the show, Hugh. Chris from Missouri is here. All you guys that were there. I saw so much content of Chris, the mayor of Strongsville. It was great. Mookie says it's in a hockey rink as well, which is definitely very cool. Very, very cool for sure. Tony Southern Collector says Strongsville was amazing. I didn't think there was any way it could live up to the hype, but it actually surpassed it. That's the same perspective I have at this point for sure, Tony. It seems that way. But okay, guys, let's bring Dave. Dave, you good to go? Dave's good to go. Joe, you ready for Dave?
Yeah, let's bring
All
Dave.
right, guys. Let's bring Iowa Dave onto the show. What is going on? Dave, welcome back.
Hey, Jeremy. Hey, Joe. Thanks for having me. It's great to see you. I have never consumed as much content from one show as I have from the Strongsville content that's been out here the last week or so. Just one after the next. And just like you, Jeremy, I pause it and I rewind. I'm like, did I see what I thought I saw? Because it's not what maybe the camera person is zooming on. I'm like, oh, that is what I thought I saw. So at some point, I'm going to have to make the pilgrimage to Strongsville.
Yeah, well, maybe we can do that together. Maybe the three of us and everybody else can be there next year. We have a whole year to plan for it, guys. So let's do our best. It would be great to be there. But Dave, it's great to have you back. You've been on the 2.0 version of Sports Cards Live here at least once already. And I listened to your second last podcast drop. And as I don't know if you heard me say this, because I saw you pop in to the back room here right after I said that. I told the audience, I said, I sent Dave a DM after I listened to his podcast, the essay he wrote about the back of cards. And I sent you a DM. I said, Dave, you're not going to like this, but I think you've just entered legendary status for content. I think that podcast was so, here's what I think that we always hear the whole 10x the hobby. Everybody wants to grow the hobby, except for the people who want to kill it. There's enough of those people too. But the people that want to grow the hobby, we all want to grow the hobby in a way. And one of the easiest ways to do it, I think, Dave, is what you were getting at in that podcast. So, and I'm going to give the mic to you to explain your thought process with it, but I'm going to kind of add a spoiler, which is we are so used to looking at the front of the cards. There's as much real estate on the back of the cards that can be used in very many ways, creative ways, productive ways, educational ways. And I came off listening to your podcast. I was up for one of my late night walks, and I just thought to myself, if you want to grow the hobby, you need to blast out Iowa Dave's most recent podcast to everybody from the top to the bottom, collectors, non-collectors, boys, girls, men, women. I think there's something really there, Dave. So let's hear from you. Tell us a little bit about that episode. Anyone who hasn't seen it, anyone who hasn't done the required reading for this show tonight, can you give us your kind of synopsis, and then let's try to delve into the topic?
Yeah, and thank you for saying that. I really do appreciate it. So after years and years of saying, I got to start a binder, I finally started one earlier this year. And long story short, one of the pages in the binder, I have all the cards facing backward, in which I have the back of the card on the front of the page. So that's the first thing that I see when I turn to. It comes from my appreciation of the backs of the cards from when I was growing up. And the card that sparked it, even though I was already an adult when it came out, was this 2004 Upper Deck Ricky Henderson card, which is the only card of Henderson that has his entire playing day stats. You need almost a microscope to be able to look, to put it under to see all of his stats, right? Because typically when somebody retires, they don't put out a card the next year, but he didn't officially retire. It felt like he was going to play forever. And so Upper Deck, hedging their bets, put him in their set, except he never played in the majors again, which means it had everything from 79 through 2003 when he played. And that's one of the cards in the binder. And you look at this and you think, this is a person who played a quarter of a century, who transcended the careers of Willie McCovey through Albert Pujols, right? It's 60 plus years of baseball. And then my mind just started racing. And I started thinking of the hours that I spent on the floor of my childhood room, looking more at the backs of the cards than the front. Because you look at the front, you can kind of get a picture of it, and then it kind of just stays in your mind. And even now, I can see cards from the 80s, and I know exactly what they look like. And I think a lot of us can say the exact same thing. But it was the backs of those cards where you start learning full players' names and these little idiosyncrasies about their personal lives and their careers. And that's where the connection started. And to put a little bow on where the essay that I wrote went, it was this idea that it wasn't just collecting, it was this inevitable education that was happening that I didn't even know was happening, both in history and in math. And yes, it was a remedial level of math, but I was a kid. And those are the levels of math that you're learning at that point, where you're learning like division and addition and algebra, because some numbers are omitted from the back of the card. So you have to start doing your own and putting these, different X's and Y's in, just trying to figure out, even though that's not what you think that you're doing, that is what you're doing. But it's also the history component in which you're learning, oh, so-and-so broke a record held by somebody from 1950, whatever. And next thing you know, you've got this growing library of knowledge about sports, but sports is part of culture, and culture is part of the broader society. And next thing you know, you are a citizen in some way. And that might sound possibly overly dramatic to some, and I can totally see that perspective if that's what you're hearing coming out of my mouth. But that is really what the backs of cards did. And, even now, when I think back to some of those cards and some of the ones today that still honor that tradition, I really appreciate when those types of figures and stats and histories appear on the back of the card. And I just wanted to put something out there for perpetuity that would be an appreciation for what the backs of the cards can be and the kind of value that they can have.
Yeah, and especially when it comes to vintage cards, because so many of vintage cards do have stats. And pre-war, like before they put stats, they told stories. They told you what teams they played for, amongst other things. And like you said in your essay, which you read through in the podcast, some baseball cards will show the ERA, the earned runs against, on the back of the cards, while some might just show the runs against and the innings pitched, and you got to calculate it yourself. And we learned, or for hockey, goals against average for a player. You might not get that stat in a column, but maybe you'll get how many goals against there were and how many games they played. And I remember being a kid and studying the back of these cards, memorizing the players' statistics, the most recent year, what year they were born, all these things, the heights, the weights, which way they shot, which way they batted, all these different things. But it was the math that really got me really interested in it. It was the statistics and looking at the back of the card and thinking, how are these different averages calculated as a youngster? And that was a big part of, I think, in junior high and high school, math was my strong subject. I did very well in those subjects. And I have to think that I can attribute some of it to an early interest in calculating numbers in my head by looking at the backs of sports cards. And that's where I think that there is a potential we want to grow the hobby. Statistics are a great way to get kids thinking about numbers and doing calculations in their head about things that they care about that are not just formulas in a textbook. It's a real case study almost, if you will, on things that they're watching anyway. So I don't know exactly how I would roll that out, but I feel like there's got to be a way that the hobby could grow if we could put more cards that don't just have congratulations, you have what may or may not be a piece of jersey from a player, and you have an auto, you've received an autograph of such and such player. I'm just so tired of all the congratulations. Give me some meat on the back of the cards, And before, go ahead.
I was going to say, and just logically, if a card exists, there have to be two sides to it. So why not put effort into making the back of the card beneficial? Why? I don't know. Maybe it comes down to a copywriters cost too much to pay, right? And so instead of putting something interesting on the back, a little narrative about someone's past or whatever, maybe it's better just to take a second photo because the photographer already sent in all their images, or who knows what the reason is. But you can't have a back of the card if the front of the card isn't there. And I know that sounds silly the way that I say that, but it's already there. So make the use out of it and give us something that's memorable.
Yeah. Joe, where do you fall on this? Did you grow up like Dave and I are talking, studying the stats on the back or reading about the players' histories?
Yes, I definitely did pre-internet, and we may have had a few. I remember having these things called red books that would have a ton of stats in the 70s that had a few pictures, picked it up at the ballpark. But Dave, thank you for your essay. Jeremy mentioned amplifying the hobby, but another way to look at it is increasing our own appreciation for both in the here and now, but also in a nostalgic way, our interactions with our cards as children, as young people, and the curiosity, the wonder, as you mentioned with the Osborne Earl, somebody, what's behind those names of Ozzie Smith, the people that might have, had that name, and then the decision, to go ahead and put that on the back of the card. I'm also an English teacher in a former life. Maybe English teachers are always English teachers to some degree, but your call to action, right? And some of these rhetorical appeals that you utilized in your audio essay, I just found it incredibly beautiful and moving. So I want to, in the spirit of a call to action, I want everyone in the chat to give it a listen, because it is concise, it is fluid, and it moves forward, but it also has a sort of recursivity where you return to things over and over. The call to action for Panini, hey, do better. Yeah, give us more than just 1 year. And Jay Lee, when you ask if reverses, I guess is the technical name, the back or reverses of cards are important to me. Just now I was thinking of it, and I can pretty much see in my mind's eye all the backs, from 75, 74, 73, 72. I don't need to see the fronts to know what year that card is. And I was not a math student, but I loved the part where you mentioned that you ended up doing much better than you anticipated on the standardized tests. I had a similar moment in my GRE exams where I did better on the mathematical section than the language section, which was shocking to me. And I think it had a lot to do with parsing numbers and kind of configuring some of the, somewhat basic, but you went down a few rabbit holes there that were more than basic mathematical computation. So anyway, I just want to send a huge appreciation to you. And maybe at some point when we have time, I know Jay Lee's got tons of people in the chat. I'd love to hear about your writing process, and not being so familiar with your station. I'd love to hear if that's a common thing for you to do an audio style essay, because I just thought it worked exceptionally well.
Thank you. Thanks for saying that. I do write on my own. I've never done an audio style essay like that. The podcast that I do, The Shallow End, started just about 2 years ago exactly. And when you count the sort of limited series that I've done, plus the base episodes that I've done, I'm at around 130 episodes or so. But this was the first time that I ever wrote out an entire episode. And I thought, most of the time, I'll do is I'll script my intro so that I make sure I hit all the points that I want to hit, and I'll just make some notes and just kind of talk and let it flow. Because if you read it, people can tell that you're reading, and it doesn't always have the inflections that you want, doesn't have the spontaneity that you need. But this one just felt a little bit different, a little bit too important, and so I made the conscious decision to write this one out, but then tell the listeners that, hey, this is an essay. This was written out. So if it sounds a little bit different, if I sound a little more dull and more nasally than usual, then that's the reason why, is because this was something that I'm trying a little bit different. And I'll probably do it again for sure. It was nice not having to worry about what was going to come out of my head or my mind next, because I knew what it was. And it gave me some time to go back and revise and rethink a little bit before I put voice to recorder at that point and to come out. So that was what my process was. Now, since it came out, I have done a little more sort of basic level research on modern cards and their backs of the cards. I'd love to get you, Jeremy, and you, Joe, your thoughts on this. It's really interesting. So there are cards that come out today that still have stats and still have facts on them. But the most fascinating thing that I noticed is that if you look at the cards that have them, so here's what they are. You can probably tell what the common denominator is of each of them. It's Hoops basketball. It's Donruss football. It's Series 1 Topps baseball. And those are all just sort of the first releases of the year. They're among the cheapest releases of the year. And what happens is as the releases get farther along into the season and they get more expensive and more desirable, all of a sudden the back of the card becomes less useful. And you get these things you get these flowery platitudes that say absolutely nothing. Like this year's Prism LeBron James card, where it's got a really cool picture on the front. It's him, his receding hairline. It shows his age. He's throwing the powder up in the air. And you flip it over, and on the back, you see the exact same image, cropped differently. And then it has, and you being an English teacher, Joe will appreciate this, it has very much a telling instead of showing approach, where it just says, at his age, he's just getting better. Yeah. There are stats out there for you to show us with this, or some examples you can pull from, whether it's from a game or comparisons to other years. So why do you two think this might be, that the more valuable the set, the less effort they seem to put into the back of the card?
I think it's got to do with what's on the front of the card. In many cases, it's an autograph or it's a piece of memorabilia. And in those cases, they have to congratulate you. And it's always in big font. And they have to give you their statement of authenticity or their statement of questionability. I guess we could maybe start. I don't know if it's really a statement of authenticity. It's really a statement of questionability. Like, we're not sure what we're putting on this card here, guys, because we don't know what it's associated with. But here you go, take it and be happy, and celebrate the hit that you just got. So I think that's got a lot to do with it, Dave. And it's also, if you are somebody who in your modern collecting, you are really focusing on autograph and memorabilia cards, and maybe you're not collecting base sets of a comprehensive checklist where there are stats on the back. If you are really limiting yourself to mid to high end products, you're not going to see the stats on the back of cards. And I also think that the card companies at that point, back in the day, they were only making a few hundred cards a year. So they only needed to write up a couple hundred or whatever it was, 700 and however many cards were in the Topps base sets and et cetera. That's all they had to do. Now they're putting out 2 to 3 brands a month, and there's not as much time to be spent. The same thing comes with photo selection. You mentioned the same image on the back, just cropped differently. My understanding is that every time they add a different photo to a card, they have to pay another licensing fee for that photo. So it's more economical to just take the same photo and switch it up a little bit, crop it differently and put it back there, which to me is kind of a waste of space at that point. I love cards that have multi-photos on them, especially when you have a really nice back with a photo and a little story. Even in the late 70s, in that creative era, the arena design era, I think about the Hot Shots and the Scoring Kings and all these inserts that had a little statement about the player on them. And it might not have told you where they played in the minors or what their height and weight were, but it told you something about them. It gave you a little nugget of information that maybe you could tell your friends when you went out for recess that day, And so I think there's a few reasons why, but I do think that they do still include statistics, but again, it's on the set builder sets. And that's really where I think it should be. So when I said earlier, like, could we use card backs to grow the hobby? I think we the hobby could, but maybe on the lower end cards and getting, more kids, I've been seeing posts lately. It's like, here's the top 5 cards graded by PSA this month, but number 4 is blanked out. It's like, who is it? Maybe card backs could do that, leave a blank stat. It's like, calculate this for yourself, write it on the card. Well, obviously no one's going to do that, but that kind of thing. Like, there's so many different ways that they could do it. One of the things though, Dave, that I miss the most are the cartoons. And someone made that comment here. Vintage Card Collector said, I love cartoons on the back of vintage cards. So do I. To me, those are, and if you notice on the thumbnail for this episode tonight, I grabbed 5 of them, covered all the 4 major sports and an extra one, and put them all on the thumbnail. And if you look at them, I mean, they're pretty cool little pieces of art. They'd make good stickers. They'd make good tattoos. They're just cool little pieces of clip art, I guess you could call it. But I mean, I remember loving those things back then. So the back of cards is something that I feel like many people look at them. I'm not going to say nobody looks at them. People do look at them, but how much are you how often and ask yourself the question, if you are doing this, great. Are you reading the story on the back? Like, here's my, 1933 Sport Kings. Look at all that text there. Look at all that text. Like, I literally need reading glasses to read it. It's so small, but there's a paragraph. There's an essay on the back of that card. And that's what I want to read. I love that. To me is additional value of a card, additional enjoyment value, because I get to sit there and read and learn about something about the player. But I was going to say, ask yourselves, are you looking at the back of cards to soak it up, or are you only looking at it to assess the condition? Are you looking for flaws in the paper itself? Are you looking at the edges, the corners, or are you really enjoying the card back? With the kind of money we often have to spend to get the cards we want, it only makes sense that we would soak up as much value from these cards for ourselves. And that it's not just enjoying the picture on the front of a card, which I love, but the back. And I think I have a feeling that there's so many people who, and hopefully some people listening today are like, yeah, I'm going to start checking out the backs of cards now. I'm going to start looking at that before I make a purchase decision, or before I'm done enjoying it for the day, the night, or before it goes into the box. So does that kind of all resonate with you, Dave?
Yeah, 100%. I'm thinking about this card I have here in front of me. It's a 2023 Bowman University now, Caitlin Clark, right? So it's when she broke the NCAA scoring record. And you flip it over, and it's another picture. And I start thinking, what are the things that you need to know about this? They're putting this out because she broke the record. What are some of the basic elements that should be included there? How many points did she score? It's a record. What did she score? Not on there. Whose record did she break? Kelsey Plum. Not on there. What is going on here? And taking it back to what we were discussing before, I think the reason that the higher level the card financially, it's because what the motivations for those cards are start to shift and they start to change. So you're looking at Series 1 baseball, looking at Donruss football, you're looking at Hoops basketball. They're just trying to move product, right? Those are the first ones that are out. And you know that as soon as further products come out, things like Select and Prism, everything else, the first ones that come out are just going to, they're going to plummet in value. But the audience changes at that point. And yes, we can make the jokes about there are kids walking around card shows with, tens of thousands of dollars worth of cards in their cases, but most kids, they're not. And so the cards they are going to buy are going to be those cheaper end cards. But when the cards become more expensive, when it becomes immaculate, when it becomes flawless and becomes Dynasty and those other brands, it becomes more about acquisition and possession. And investment and less about, I've just dropped $25,000 on this Wembanyama card. Let's see what he likes to eat when he goes home for dinner. It's not what no one cares at that point, right? At that point, you want to know what you're buying is authentic. And so that's what the purpose of the card is, in addition to what grading can do as well. So I think the purpose of the card changes, which is why these low-end cards can still afford to put information on it. They can still afford to put knowledge on it because the stakes are so much lower. I don't know if that makes any sense. What do you think?
I think that's right. And I think that, like, is there no room to put a little blurb about the players along with all the stats? In some cases, there isn't room for it. But I just want to bring up one comment. Mookie Chilson says, I bet Topps has AI write the blurbs on the backs of cards
100%.
now.
100%. Yep.
And, I don't really care if it's a copywriter on staff, as long as AI is producing something interesting and quirky maybe about the player that we didn't know before, that wasn't just on the back of his card the year before that. That's fine. But hopefully someone is at least reviewing it and putting a stamp of approval before just just trusting AI as if they're running the company. So yeah, I'd like to see more of that. But Joe, over to you on Dave's question if you have a response.
Yeah, what comes to mind is just sort of speed to production, which I think is in line with the money machine, the money-making machine that the companies essentially are. There's a laziness, and not to get too, I don't want to sound too holier than thou, but a laziness, I think, in society in terms of quick hit, dopamine. Like, do people read anymore? It's a fair question in some instances. Images and quick hitting lines tend to dominate a lot of people's consciousness at this point. So that's what they know. I was thinking about other card backs, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with the 1964 Topps. They had it was one of those ones where you must have had to scratch it off. And of course, I wasn't alive in 1964, but most of the 64 Topps cards I have faded enough, even if nobody actually scraped them off with, I don't know, a nickel. But sometimes they would have really cool images. You mentioned sort of clip art, Jeremy, but that was, that was a way, and it speaks to, Dave, something that was kind of a main idea in your essay, was just engagement. There was the manufacturers, the producers of these cards back then really were thinking, how can we have the people buying these packs engage with the information, engage with the back of the card. Another unique design that comes to mind is 71, where I believe you have a picture of the of the players. So even as far back then, you got a kind of double dip of an image, which still to this day, I love it. Like 90s inserts, when you have a cool insert, but maybe in some of those instances, like, raise the roof or something like that, you might not get a very good image of the player's face. But then if you turn it around and there's a secondary image, it makes you feel better about like the whole overall value of the card, aesthetically speaking. So anyway, those are some of my responses there.
Yeah, Joe, what you were saying too about this crisis of reading that is there made me think. There's a piece that came out in the Atlantic last October or so. It was called "The Elite College Students Who Can't Read Books." And in the opening of the story, there's a humanities professor from Columbia University who tells the story of one of the high-performing freshmen who comes up and says, you expect us to read this novel in 1 or 2 weeks, and I can't do it. Because in high school, they never expected us to read books anymore. They would give us excerpts from it and just sort of Cliff's Notes types of things. And I do kind of wonder if some of that thought has transferred over. What counts as entertainment now. I'm not going to say it's any better or worse than what it was 50 years ago, but it's different. Yeah. Right. And so where you just talked about entertainment value and giving other types of value in these cards, I don't think cards are looked at quite the same way anymore. Whereas when you had you mentioned the 71 tops. When that came out, they were trying to find some way to add value to it. And the way to do it was to make the back of the card a complement and even an accessory to the front. Whereas now you don't necessarily have to do that because people are going to buy those cards anyway. And they're not going to care so much about what they see on the back, unfortunately.
One of the biggest kind of misses or just missed opportunities that I see now are when I turn over the card of a young player. Well, it doesn't have to be a young player, but it's often a young player. You turn over the card and like it's 80 to 90% white space or just blank. There's literally nothing there. All this wasted real estate that could be used to entertain the card owner, the customer, the collector, the hobbyist. I don't know. It just seems like, now I've seen, it's been said here, and I've seen someone made a comment, it's being lazy on the part of the card companies. And I mean, that's one kind of easy way to say it, but I actually just wonder if it's a function of them putting out too many products for the staff that they have, so that like there's nobody that could do that. There's nobody on staff that could take the time to write 400 card backs or decide what to put on them, because once the card fronts are done, the minimalist backs are done, they're on to designing the next product. Like it's different than it was even 30 years ago. There's so many things coming out now. And I also feel like, okay, so hire someone, we could say, well, sure, but is that within their business model? And or are they too, and then some people say, well, it's too much corporate greed. That's what they're in business for, is corporate greed, though. So I mean, it's hard to really misunderstand that. But I just wish that wasn't the case, and that they could fill up that blank space with something that would be entertaining and bring additional value, because it does. While I don't know that it's a function of being lazy, I think it's a logistical thing, but it feels like it's lazy. It looks like it's lazy. It walks and talks like it's lazy, and it feels like we're getting ripped off sometimes. If you are buying these cards and you turn it over, there's nothing there except sometimes a sentence that says, again, the relic on the front of this card is not from anything that we know. And that's just like, my gosh, that's all you got. So yeah. Okay, let's go to some comments, guys. And then when we come back from these, Dave, maybe we can talk about your other more recent drop that you did, because I think it was your last two were just excellent, if I may say. Pat Riley is happy to see Iowa Dave on the show. Chris C here says, the issue, in my opinion, with growing the hobby is one company controls it all. It's one reason why I gravitate towards older 90s cards and some vintage whenever possible. New cards are way overpriced, especially wax. Yeah, I mean, good points there, Chris. I think when somebody says that one company controls it all, that's where I just have to push back, because they only control this year's product and those moving forward. They don't control anything else from the past, in my mind. So I don't give them as much power as Chris is saying here. But on this topic, new products coming out, they do for sure. CRT sports cards, the back of the card is so much better than the front. Chris is known for collecting the Polar Bear T206 set, which is, I think the coolest back. They're advertising backs. There's not much more there. A lot of pre-war cards also have blank backs. Function of kind of what they were packaged with, I believe. Mookie Chilson says there's magic on the back of cards. Yes. Tony says the back of the card is the soul of the card. Maybe borrowing a line from Iowa Dave's podcast. Lonely Basement says, I couldn't do algebra, but I could calculate a batting average. Right. That's what I think is really cool. Vintage says, I love cartoons. Yeah, we did that one. I agree. Dan said, Dave is such an intelligent, thoughtful commentator, a true gem hobby hero. Could not agree more. Dan. Mookie said, before the internet and without a sports encyclopedia, the back of the card was the only place you could find all that info. The back had all the knowledge a kid needed. Right, exactly. Those are different days. And maybe that's partly why they don't put them there, because you can just pick up your phone, say, yo, Siri, what was the batting average of this player in that year? And you're going to get it instantly. So I wonder if they're kind of thinking that people don't need it like they did before because times have changed. Personally, I think that's a miss, but it could be. Ziggy No here says, I believe the hobby today is majority non-collector. I'd put true personal collector that spend money and don't replace at less than 30% and declining. I don't really follow that middle part, but I think what he's saying is that we're seeing just, more non-collectors and collectors. I think what I think? I think that those stats that Ziggy puts on here are what he is seeing out there in his hobby world. And I'm not, and that's fair, right? That's what we all see, something different as we consume and open up our computers and, open up our apps and everything. We're all taking something different, but there's so many collectors out there still. I think they are under quantified when oftentimes by a lot of us who spend a lot of our time living online. Richie Rocket here says it must be more economical to have shorter write-ups and fewer stats on the card backs, making the card back on my custom cards are both time consuming and unsatisfying. Well, and he does a lot of his cards based on Upper Deck where patch autos, there's not a lot of stuff on the back anyway. You'd have to come up with your own card backs, Richie. Pat Riley, the backs of the 1999 Skybox Thunder are legendary. They have the wackest wraps ever wonder penned. It's amazing. Very good. Mookie, the 1953 Bowman left a field open for kids to fill in that year's stats. Some kids accepted the assignment. That's awesome, right? That's what I'm talking about. Mark Santucci points out scratch off like 1980-81 Topps Hockey. You could scratch off like a lottery ticket. That's the front of the card, but still, I think relevant from Mark. Laura here says they got rid of the back of the card department in the modern age. It sure feels that way. Miles Freeman, the congrats on the back is avoid at all costs for me, which means you can't control relics or autos, which, hey, that's totally fine. Of course, found treasures. What's going on? Mookie Chilson, the back of the card turns into congratulations when you get a big hit, which is a big fat editorial punt. Yep, agree. Rob Scott said the backs of vintage hockey sometimes states where the player worked in the off season. Remember, these guys needed second jobs to get by. Jeff's card journey. I bought a card today with a blank back, which is funny. Cards were deliberately blank backed early on. You had errors of cards with blank backs in the 80s. And now in the 2000s, we see blank backs as like an Easter egg kind of card, It's like how they're doing it on purpose as a homage to when they did it by mistake back in the day. Miles Freeman says, if it's an auto on the front and a congrats on the back, why not buy a cut auto index card? I hear what you're saying, Miles. For me, I don't collect cut auto index cards. Not interested. I'd rather have an autograph on a card, but the people who just collect index cards, I think that would make a lot of sense for them. We just went through a ton of comments, guys. Dave, why don't you if you want anything stick out to you in those comments that you want to address?
Oh, just so much. The comment that stood out the most, and I'm sorry I can't remember who it was, but the one talking about the jobs that the hockey players worked in the off season. That I loved cards like that. Or they mentioned so and so's great uncle played for the St. Louis Browns in 1931. It's just those obscure little facts, and it makes me think of. I had this book. I got it in the 80s. It was called the Baseball Encyclopedia. And what it is, it's just basically what Baseball Reference is now. But it was a book that you could probably kill an intruder. It was so thick, right? It was like that big, and it was the stat of every baseball player who had ever played. And you would sit there and you just go through it and go through it and go through it. You could give me a 5-page short story to read in Mrs. Chow's 3rd grade class, and I'd be like, oh, I don't want to read it. And I'd put it down. I would start arguing with my parents. And then I would go through and read 20 pages out of the Baseball Encyclopedia, which is a 3-point type. And it's probably the reason now why I'm wearing bifocals, right? But it was just different because there was an interest there, and I was choosing to see it because you remember things like that, like the hockey cards with their off-season employment on it.
Yeah. You're mentioning these other references, and the one I remember buying annually in the 80s was, do you guys remember this? Or I don't think it was a Canadian thing only because it was certainly for baseball, but it was called Who's Who in Baseball. And it came out that I used to buy that every year in the 80s. And I would you get a little picture of the player. It was like a bunch of card backs in a book. And I remember the one, it was a red cover, it had Dwight Gooden on the front. I kept that one the longest. I don't think I could find it anymore in my in my house anywhere. But those were like, I don't know, as kids. Listen, kids today have so many other things that they can just reach for and get all sorts of information, whether it's their iPads even, right? I mean, and all the books and all the toys that parents buy nowadays. Back when I was a kid, well, back when we were kids, we wanted to read stats of baseball players, hockey players, football, basketball. I mean, that's what it was about, right, Dave?
Being bored is a wonderful thing. Being bored forces you to find something that interests you. We don't have to. Everything is on demand. Every song is right there. Every show is right there. Every food you can DoorDash right away. You don't have the chance to be bored, which means you just kind of move from one thing to the next, and get off my yard. But you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, totally. Joe, you got anything stick out from all those comments? I got 3 more. We have our next guest joining us shortly, but let's go to Joe first.
Yeah, I mean, I'm remembering some of the literature that I launched into as a young person, 12, 13, 14, Roger Angell, in the land of, sort of baseball, fiction that was loosely based on, 30s and 40s. And it was the kind of thing where, I would tell this to parents who had concerns about their kids not being very literary. They would say, what should they read? What can we do? And I say, literally anything. I mean, comic books, anything that piques their interest, because inevitably you can learn syntax, you can process information, and you can, again, become engaged and have your curiosity piqued when you start, when you have passion connected to the process. And so sports cards, baseball cards in particular for me, were kind of a launching pad for all sorts of other intellectual pursuits, because they give you just enough, and then you'd kind of want a little bit more. You don't have to read Henry James, right, to learn, what actually constitutes a complete sentence, or maybe they're using a comma or a dash or a colon. So all those things could help a young person just start to gradually internalize the fundamentals of syntax, diction, and grammar.
Yeah, it's so many different things to consider when it comes to the values of both sides of the card, for sure. A couple more comments that did come in I wanted to bring up. Ziggy, I think he's not far off here. He says they will sell ads on the back of cards. Could you imagine? Like, let's face it, they're putting ads on the front of cards now. When the just think of the first one that comes to mind for me is Red Bull patches from Max Verstappen's uniform on F1 cards. You're seeing Red Bull. That's a Red Bull ad that got on. Like, it's all about sponsorship, right? So we're already seeing them on the front of cards. Could we see them on the back of cards? Greg here said collectors are the silent majority of the hobby, putting it in his estimation over 50%. And I kind of think he's probably right. I think that my gut feel is that there's still more collectors than non-collectors. Just the non-collectors, many of them, they're so vocal on social media because they need to be to sell their cards, to build their flipper brand, if you will, or whatever it is. But I do think that there are so many collectors out there still, and a lot of them just collect to themselves. But that's a whole, that could be a whole other full discussion. Jacob Dahl here says, I always need my card backs in nice shape, especially vintage cards, because I love to read the backs. I just love hearing that, because it just shows that, Jake is taking advantage and deriving value from the backs of the cards that he is seeing. Linda's first says Upper Deck shows NHL player jersey ads. They don't Photoshop them out. Fair enough. Mookie says Polar Bear, Piedmont, Sweet Caparel are all ads. Back to the Future. They are all ads, Joe.
Real quick, just I had to look just to make sure I was getting it right. But if you guys know Double D Vintage, he did a drop, I think just today or yesterday, where he was really good festive kind of a hobby drop. He was standing and he's in his his sports card cave, and anyway he highlights one Japanese card where it was all about the Pepsi sign for him, and he kind of explained his relationship to Pepsi. And I thought it was kind of hilarious because there is sometimes, I mean, this is getting to the front of cards a little bit, but it's, those nostalgic hits of advertising and or things that remind us of what, a sign or a branding symbol might have looked like in the 70s or 80s. Total down the rabbit hole. Sorry, guys. Little distracted.
No, all good. Go ahead, Dave.
Now it makes me think of the card, the Randy Johnson card with the Marlboro sign. Or when Upper Deck started sponsoring hockey, and there'd be Topps hockey card with Upper Deck's logos in the back of them, and it's just a part of it. Hey, let's go watch the Cubs play at Wrigley Field. Everything's an advertisement in sports.
Definitely, and cards really are part of cards themselves is to promote the game, which is, I think that's the purest form of the card advertising something on a card, perhaps. But Dave, you also recently did a drop on a collecting lane, and I really found it interesting the angle that you took with it, which wasn't what I was expecting from the title of the episode. When I hear people talking about collecting in a lane, it's usually like pick a lane or stick to your lane. That's what we hear people say. And you were basically saying, and I loved the perspective. You were taking the perspective of, do we really need to take a lane? Like, are lanes good or bad for the hobby or neither? And I thought that was a really interesting angle because I think about my own collecting, and I collect in many lanes. I've got probably a dozen lanes that I'm collecting in, and I have to manage those and allocate card capital to each one and decide how they stack up as far as the my personal hierarchy. What's most important? Do you want to give us a bit of a synopsis on that episode and what you were thinking? And before you do, though, Leighton Sheldon has joined us. I told him we're going to bring you on at 11 o'clock Eastern. Leighton, I'm going to bring you on, and let's bring Leighton on. Let's say hello, and then let's let Dave talk about Lane. So, Leighton, good to see you. Welcome back. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me, Jeremy.
You're welcome. You know Joe well by now. Have you and Dave ever crossed paths?
We have. How are you, Dave?
Good to see you again.
Might have been on this show, so I apologize.
Vintage spotlight.
Vintage spot. There we go. There we go. It's funny. Up until changing over to Sports Cards Live 2.0, I'd had probably 400 to 500 people through the channel over 4.5 years. Now in the last half year, I think it's already been like close to 100. So it's more and more people are coming through as we bring more and more people on every night. Leighton, good to see you. Welcome to the show. Like I said, let's let Dave kind of talk about, and I saw you were kind of nodding in the background, Leighton, so you might know what's about to come here. But Dave, tell us a little bit about your thoughts and what you discussed on that episode of The Shallow End.
Sure, thank you. And first, I want to give credit to my guest on this past show, his name is Pat. He goes by Insta Account Haver on Instagram. And the question that we were trying to pull apart is just how important are collecting lanes? Because we hear the question is, what's your lane? Or here's what my lane is, or I'm closing this one and I'm going to go to this one. And the question that I wanted to pose was, why do we have to be so strict with these lanes? And just by imposing so many rules, does it make collecting less fun, less enjoyable in some way? And if I'm going to jump to the end real quick, and I'll circle back and get to how we got there. But the end is, and Pat brought this up, which is, if you have no rules, it's going to be chaos. And that's a disaster. You're going to be spending too much. You're going to be completely unfocused. You're going to be unhappy. You're not going to have any direction. And at some point you might just leave. But coming back around is like, sure, you need to have some lanes, but how rigid versus how elastic do you want to be with this? Where if you let's say if you are collecting a certain player and you come across a card of somebody who you don't collect in a sport that you don't collect, if you just buy it because you like it or because you want it, because you think it might be enjoyable, are you somehow betraying the rest of your collection because you're buying it? And my thought is no, because let's not take this so seriously. Unless this is your business, that's a different thing. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the collecting side of it is, why do we want to restrict ourselves from experiencing something new or trying something new. We might get it and we might not like it, but that's better than not trying it in the first place. And so it was just pushing back a little bit on this idea that we have to be a certain something at all times. When, I mean, most of this doesn't matter. If you collect something and you realize I don't want this anymore and you get rid of it, we're going to keep going around the sun. It's going to be okay. So maybe let's just loosen up a little bit and feel free to try something. Maybe we'll love it and maybe we won't, but who cares? Let's just try it.
I think what you're saying is give yourself permission to get into a lane, but you can take the first exit if you want and never come back to it if you try it out and you don't like it. Leighton, let's hear from you a little bit. You've heard a little bit here. I don't know if you were listening to the early part of the show when we were talking about card backs and how kind of just overlooked they can be in many cases. Would you mind giving us your perspective on card backs, the value of them, the beauty of them, the level of interesting features they may have, and then your thoughts on lanes as well, if you don't mind?
Sure. So let's go over lanes because I was not part of the conversation earlier and I was not listening. Kraz and I were watching some NBA basketball playoffs. But I find it really interesting what you posed, Dave, on your show. And I think it's a great question. And I think the first place I would start is it's really nice that, folks are kind of taking the opposite side of like, you got to be on the set registry, right? Or you got to be in the flipping game, which is also an extreme end of things. I think that we should encourage people to enjoy the space and to try, like if you go to the mall, you might go to the mall for a long sleeve shirt and you walk out with a new pair of flip-flops. Is that wrong? I don't know. But I think that if you wanted the flip-flops and you paid for them, I think that's fair. So, I mean, to me, I think some of the most fun and some of the best items I've ever got for my collection from auctions, I guess I should say, is when you start bidding in an auction. Let's just say it's like, hey, I'm looking for inventory for my company, Just Collect. Well, I'll check out, the photo section. Meanwhile, I'm like really excited for this photo coming in from SCP that I won recently. And I didn't know that I was going to that auction to bid or buy on that or to ultimately buy it. So, I think it's nice to be able to have a little bit of guidance, but then also be willing to, kind of break free from, what you might normally do so that you can continue to enjoy whatever the hobby means to you.
Yeah.
As far as backs, Jeremy, it's a whole other thing, but I figured I'd pause there.
Yeah, no, and if you didn't hear the first part, I don't want to. I kind of be throwing you to the wolves there. Who knows where you go with that? But so we'll give you a pass on that for tonight. No problem. It was a fun conversation though. Dave, do you want to respond to Leighton though before we move along?
Yeah, one thing I was just thinking, Leighton, as you were talking there, is that not all lanes. The width of lanes is not always equal, right? There can be bike lanes that are so narrow. And that might be the equivalent of I collect just this player. But then you talk to someone who goes, I'm a vintage collector. That makes it sound like it's really narrow. But vintage, there's like 60 years worth of cards there and so many different sports. So I think if we can recalibrate what we mean by lane in the first place, and I'm sorry for getting into the semantics of it, right? But, just there's so much to experience here. And I see people sometimes almost express an anxiety over hey, got this card. It's a little bit outside of my lane. Okay, great. Go and enjoy it. No one's judging you. Like really, like the only people that matter in terms of like judging your collection is yourself necessarily. And the last episode that came out wasn't a response to anybody. It was just something that had been sort of bouncing around in there. And then, Pat is just such a great guy to talk to about it. He's got such good ideas for it that I think the way to take this hobby seriously is to not take it so seriously.
Yeah, fair. Joe, how about you on all this stuff?
Yeah, just real quick. I mean, for me, I was always in a pretty, coming into emerging out of just collecting vintage, I became extremely eclectic. And the whole lane thing was a bit of a revelation for me because sometimes I'd overpay for cards that I wasn't familiar with. And this was all, before Card Ladder, right? Pre-Card Ladder, where there was not as much information available about fair comps. With Card Ladder and or, other ways to access, appropriate pricing information, yeah, you're not quite as exposed in terms of going into a lane that maybe you're not as familiar with. I mean, for me, that the revelation of lanes for me, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, was more about not making mistakes or kind of understanding what you were dabbling in. And I feel like maybe both because I've just grown as a collector and have a broader way of looking at the hobby and maybe more access to information, as well as, tools that allow me to make proper decisions. Getting out of your lane is a perfectly wonderful thing. And I liked the suggestion that you made, Dave, too, that, you don't have to go out of your lane to the extreme, right? You can dabble a little bit, maybe get a card in hand from ComC or something where you kind of size it up and say, oh, do I like this particular issue? Insert upper deck, Court Masters or something that maybe isn't a super high-end card, but if you're going to get a Jordan in it, it might actually end up costing you quite a bit. But maybe you want to just try, a normal player, a semi-star, and just see how it looks in hand if it really does appeal to you. So I like that point in the podcast as well.
Yeah, it was. I mean, Dave's stuff is always good. The other thing about Dave's content is that he does these series where he'll do 17 of this type of episode or 25 of this, usually within a month. And it's such a unique approach to content. And I think, Dave, you're maybe the only guy who does it that way. And I think it's so creative and unique. Just let people know, where can they find your podcast? If they're not following you on Instagram or really podcast YouTube, if you could point people to one or two places, where would you point them to?
Sure. It's mostly just audio. So it's Spotify and it's Apple Podcasts. It's the shallow end. It comes out most Fridays. And then, every now and then I stray from sort of the base flagship episodes, and I just decide I want to focus on something like people who had successful chases, right? And that was the most recent one. So look on Fridays. It's bright yellow with black text. Everything's black and yellow, like the Hawkeyes here, right? That's kind of how I put that together. But that's when it comes out. I do have a YouTube page. I'm sorry to everyone who I don't update it. I'm a much better audio editor than I am a video editor. So every now and then I will put up something just for YouTube. There's one coming next week. But that's where you can find my stuff, or I with Dave Sports Cards on Instagram.
Right on. Good. Well, I appreciate you letting people know. I'm sure I hope we send a few people your way. If you're not yet listening to his podcast, guys, it's a must listen for sure. I want to ask Leighton something, but first I wanted to go get through some comments here. Tony here said, every time I buy a card, it gets delivered to me. The first thing I do is read the back. Right on. James Wynn says 12 lanes is a freeway in Los Angeles. He welcomes Leighton, the Vince Vaughn of the hobby. Linda's first says, Leighton, hello. Great video from Strongsville. Goes on to say, I have a Gretzky lane and a Crosby lane. Yeah, some people collect two players and that's it. Oh, that's great. Bob Boozle says, drive on the sidewalk. You get there faster. Forget about these paved lanes. Iconic Al from Iconic Bay. What's going on, Al? Always good to see you, buddy. What percentage of your net worth is your collection? That's a question kind of out of left field tonight, but definitely an interesting question, Al. Let's save that one for a little bit later. Al, good to see you in the chat. Pat Riley says, I do contend that lanes are really helpful at the beginning of collecting. They're useful for developing knowledge and networks, but strict orthodoxy can be too constraining. Give yourself some flexibility. Web02 says, Cardbacks inspired Tragically Hip's hit song, 50 Mission Cap, where they sing, I stole this from a hockey card I kept tucked up under. Yeah, that the Tragically Hip are probably Canada's all-time best, one of Canada's all-time best bands. Josh from 90s Auction says, lanes are meant to be changed. And then Laura said here, Joe, before Card Ladder, there was Beckett. But Beckett was like weeks old by time you would get it, is the only thing I would say to that. All right, lots there, guys. I apologize. But Leighton, you came off of Strongsville. You're not coming to the Expo next weekend. Thank you for your content out of Strongsville. And what do you want to? What were some of your takeaways from the Strongsville show?
Sure. It was a great show. And I would think that the place I'd really like to start is the Vintage Trade Night. Because if we only had a few minutes, I know you have a lot of, great guests planned for tonight. I at least want to talk about my experience with that. And it was fantastic. Keep in mind, I went there as a dealer. I also am a collector. And I kind of, was in both roles, walking around. And the stark difference that I saw, because I've been to both styles now of trade nights, it felt very homey. And it also felt like I belonged, candidly. And thirdly, once again, this is only the first one I've been to. I think the first one that many of the folks have been to, because there's not usually vintage trade nights, is I really felt like the cards were going to a permanent home. And that's vastly different than the trade nights. And so I guess what I would say to pose a question to all of you three and then the audience is, how do we take what's going on in vintage right now, which is clearly very special, and how do we help the modern card market? And I don't mean take the modern people and convert them into vintage, because that, of course, would be great. But that's not really what I mean. There's got to be something that maybe we're all missing that we could serve to the card companies, or that folks already know and maybe I don't know. But I'll tell you, man, it's not just rookie cards. It's third years, or it's I collect this set because. And as refreshing as that was, I had some time on the way home, a couple-hour flight to digest it. And I thought, number one, there better be a vintage trade night at the National. And as if there's not, then I'm definitely going to make sure I work with whoever possible to try to make it happen, like with the For Collectors organization or other folks, because it was such a really great time. But I think that the underlying and most important theme is, how do we take that magic that was happening in that very small room, and then ultimately that spilled over to the Strongsville Card Show, and how do we take that to the modern card market and make it work for that? Because truth be told, I think a healthy modern card market is really great for a vintage card market and vice versa. But when things are a little bit out of balance, and right now maybe it is, I don't know, I don't pay attention close enough to the modern card market to know. But that's my 2 cents about the trade night. And I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts.
I hear what you're saying about maybe we could lend something to the modern market. And I think about the cards because it's a different there is overlap, but it's a different demographic as well, right? And they're looking for different things. I don't know if there's nothing comes to mind for me that could get us there. And what I think about is, even modern cards, like back in the day, you only had, a few sets a year, Donruss, Fleer, top sort of thing. That's really all you had. And every year the designs were starkly different. Like they completely changed year to year for the most part. Nowadays, I look at Upper Deck Flagship Hockey. I look at Topps Baseball, Panini Basketball. They're basically the same year after year after year. They look almost the exact same. There's very minor tweaks to the designs that are meaningful, that are going to catch your eye and say, where you're going to really like one design more than the other. To me, they all blend together and look the same, Leighton. So I think to myself, that's the big difference between modern and vintage. Again, in vintage, there's just less of a selection. They look so much different, and now they differentiate. The cards are differentiated not by the design of the card year to year, but the different sets that come out. But they all look the same. So now I know this isn't exactly what you're getting at, because I think you were talking about the trade night and the community and the activities, but I don't know, unless, and it comes back to what we were talking about earlier, where, Ziggy had stated that I think 30% of the hobby are not collectors. In the modern, ultra modern, or especially ultra modern, maybe he's right. In the vintage world, I think it's the complete opposite. So I don't know what we would need to infiltrate. We being, vintage collectors, and I collect a lot of it, all of it, but would need to infiltrate the modern in order to change anything about it. So I think it's a big challenge that you're kind of thinking about, and I don't know what would do it. But hey, I'm just one brain here that is trying to do a few things all at once. So I'm not thinking completely clearly. Let's hear from Dave and Joe. Dave, what do you think?
Yeah, and it's a really good question, Leighton, and I'm going to answer. And then I'm sorry I have to jump off after this. When I think about the vintage and the bonds that people have, that's where I went first, were the bonds. And it's sometimes it's childhood memories, or it's cards they wanted and couldn't afford when they were kids or whatnot. And it's thinking nostalgically about athletes who you admired or felt connected to, or provide memories, from way back when. And it's just a different landscape. So I think I'm going to approach it from a different area where it's not so much the cards as it is the sports landscape. And I'm not saying it's bad that there's free agency. I'm not saying it's bad that there's NIL. I mean, believe me, if they had free agency during the days of Mantle and Jim Brown might have ended up playing for 2 or 3 other teams, right? The only reason they were loyal to those teams is because there was the reserve clause, right? But now players bounce around. So our connections, I think, are different. Fantasy sports allows you to, quote unquote, own a player. And regardless of what team that player goes to, you tend to follow a player more than you would say, the player on that team, because not to be loyal, because that loyalty is not going to be repaid, and nor should it be necessarily. So I think the problem that you've identified, Leighton, is that there's a loss of connection in a sense. And, maybe in the year 2055, there will be somebody who collects the Green Bay Packers and will have fond memories of Jordan Love or somebody else. And then at that point, they will feel a connection to a Jordan Love card the way we don't feel one-to-one a connection to one now, because he's only been playing for 4 years or whatever. But maybe we just need the benefit of time sometimes and be able to adjust to a different sporting landscape. It could be any of those things, but I really love that question. And I do need to hop off. I'm sorry, I need to run. I have a 14-year-old kid with a driver's permit who has texted me saying, I'm going to drive my friend home right now. And I've got to go grab those keys.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks for everything you're doing. Thanks for your content. Thanks for joining us tonight. We'll see you soon, buddy.
Thank you for having me.
Great.
You betcha. To Leighton, to your question here, David Marone brings up a point here. And sorry, Leighton, I can't see you right now. I'm going to read it myself. I can see he says, I believe that most dealers at Strongsville are collectors who relentlessly upgrade and modify their collection. Their tables contain mostly extra inventory. That can be a major key to a greater trade night. And I think he makes a really good point, right? That vintage dealers often are collectors too. And I'm not saying that modern dealers aren't. I know many modern dealers who are also collectors. I've got both on my tables at card shows. So, but then Tony here said trade night in Strongsville worked because we all love the cards and the histories of the cards and players. There was a shared love language in that room. Like, I don't know trade nights that I go to nowadays, that I've been to nowadays, and you walk through, it's just all transactional there. I haven't firsthand witnessed a lot of that shared love for the cardboard. I'm witnessing a love for money a lot of the time, and a love for the deal and getting the deal done. And hey, I understand, Leighton. I mean, you are a professional baseball card treasure hunter, but you love this stuff. You're the perfect kind of dealer in my mind, because you know the product. You also probably have a good idea as to what somebody, like if someone wants to ask you for advice or advice, what card, if you wanted to add a Yogi Berra to your collection that isn't a rookie card, which one would you maybe, like, I can see people asking you questions like that, Leighton, and you're going to know the answer, or at least give them your preference. So we're talking about just different communities, different. It's kind of a different, but the same hobby, I guess. Does that make sense?
Listen, it makes a lot of sense. It was, more of really just a very eye-opening experience for me, because, the show or the trade night, it really wasn't very large. I've been to much larger trade nights, on the modern side of things, but man, everyone was just all smiles, and, some people, of course, were buying, and there was some dealers set up. I mean, someone had a several 52 top mantles. I was actually surprised to see that. Jeremy, I think that, you're right. It's a different time, a different place. I'm more coming about it from, I guess, a standpoint of just trying to help the hobby. And I guess if there's, a way to appeal to the manufacturers, as I would tell Michael Rubin, if you're listening, it might sound crazy, but like maybe you should go to a vintage trade night and then take out, even though it's really small, you're a smarter guy than me. Maybe you're going to be able to, like, oh my God, lightning in a bottle. This is what we can do for the modern card market. And that's going to translate. Look what they've done with the modern, the debut patch. And so, I do think that there's something possible, but it's certainly not going to be done by one person. And that's really what I was trying to share, was that there was definitely something magical happening. And only because it was at the top of my mind, Jeremy, one of the things that I know you're a modern guy also, like you collect, and I know you buy and sell, Jeremy, and I think you as well, Joe, and I'm sure a lot of the audience watching tonight. I myself feel like the way you're talking about me and vintage and education, I do love it, but I could use some education on modern. There's a few people that I collect or would like to collect more of, but it's very overwhelming. And like, what do? Do I raise my hand? Right? Do I post a message on my primarily vintage Instagram to try to get a modern question answered? I don't know. Those are some of the thoughts I had, Jeremy, coming out of the trade night. Was I think we can kind of bridge the gap together. That's kind of what I'm talking about. I don't know how to do it, but those are my thoughts.
Well, let's get Joe's thoughts, because I mean, you've been soaking it all in. Joe, what do you think?
First of all, it's a fantastic question, Leighton, and it comes from a really good place of amplifying, kind of rising tide lifts all boats. Like, how can we increase appreciation and fulfillment in this card collecting journey that we're all on, whether it's vintage or modern or ultra modern? Jay Lee, I tend to agree with you that the demographic is vastly different, and the cash prospecting is sort of the lead, the lead, motivation almost. And within that, we can talk about player collecting, and we can talk about seeing around corners and kind of predictive models. And, there's that whole element. Where I do go as an ultra modern collector is aesthetics. I think if the vintage world can practice and model appreciation for aesthetics, that could be something that could, float downriver, upriver, whatever direction we're talking, to maybe have people become a little more aware and not so rote and kind of lemmings off the cliff, if you will. But thoughtful around, hey, I might want to own a card that I enjoy looking at, that I can take time with, that I don't just, have it as a kind of a concept more than an actual piece of art, something, a tangible asset that provides a sort of enjoyment factor in and of itself just by looking at it, displaying it. So, I mean, I remember Christina in the original House of Jordan. She would do, Christina's Corner, and she would discuss the aesthetic elements of particular cards. I think that's a fantastic thing, and I see vintage collectors doing that all the time. And maybe it's just a matter of trying to how can that messaging get into the world of modern and ultra modern, and there are limitations, as Jeremy already pointed out. There is a certain kind of dumbed down repetition of prism and of optic that doesn't necessarily always, color match is a big deal, right? In ultra modern right now, like to have the team's colors represented, Giannis in a green or, Curry in a gold, the team colors. So there's that. And I think ultra modern has, acknowledged that, but it does, I think, ultimately, it ought to concern the production specialists, the people who are the creatives in the organization, to think, how can we create cards of an aesthetic value that is more of an intrinsic nature, appreciating the card, than simply, this happens to be Wembayama's rookie and he's posing in front of a black, curtain, right? So anyway, that's kind of my thought, is like, can we cross-pollinate through the realm of aesthetic appreciation?
Any response to all that, Leighton?
I think it's a great point, Joe. That's how I collect some of the modern cards that I do. I think that, or if I propose something, I would suggest that the current card manufacturers, so Topps, Upper Deck, I guess Panini for the moment, they figured out a way to not only bring back the buyback as an autograph, but bring back, for example, like make a reward system so that the first person to complete the master set of every Topps card this year, you're going to get a full run of Jackie Robinson cards, right? It's the whatever anniversary. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, why are they having Jackie Robinson chases? Because they've done so much in a really innovative way, Topps. I'd love them to see them celebrate their heritage more, similar to what Topps used to do in the 90s, like in 91, when they put out vintage cards actually in the packs. I think that there's some things that they could do to interweave modern and vintage collecting that really just make it exciting, educational, and, something that's going to be a little bit more long lasting for folks. And, listen, my son doesn't know a lot about certainly vintage baseball. He knows Jackie Robinson, and he's certainly starting to understand money. And so I could see some sort of formula where it's not just Jackie Robinson that's available, but maybe there's 1,000 prizes, right? And even though you don't get a Mickey Mantle or Jackie Robinson, you actually get an authentic 1952 Topps baseball card, which even in VG might be $5 or $10. But yet, I know as a little kid, I'm sure you guys do, that are watching the show, everyone remembers the point when they got their oldest card when they were a kid. Yeah. And that oldest card stuck with you for a while, almost like a bad penny or a good luck charm. Who knows? Depending. Yeah. So lots of different possibilities if you're there and you're out there and you're listening and you're in the creative departments of these modern card manufacturers or on their marketing teams. Yeah,
well said, guys. And we're going to bring out Josh Madigan from the Hockey Cards Gong Show in just a couple minutes. And on the Hockey Cards Gong Show, they talk a lot about these sorts of topics. The design that goes into modern cards, and we'll get into that when he comes on in a couple seconds here. I just want to read and go through some comments that we've received from the chat before we do that. And we're going to start here with this comment from Dan, who said, "I'm so appreciative that Leighton changed his reservations to stay on the extra night for trade night at Strongsville." So I know it was well appreciated. And then there was another comment here from Greg at Midlife, said Leighton was super cool because he was buying stuff from a bunch of people at trade night. Super classy. That's always appreciated, Leighton. So, good on you for those things. Smithville Floor Hockey said, my lane is the top 20 NHL players since 1980. I love that lane. That's a great lane, and you get to decide who they are. Rated Rabbi David said, let's not forget to praise card backs with a discreet touch of paper loss and a small mark. The pre-war cheat code for me. Yeah, talk about a way to get a beautiful card and save yourself a whack of money. Laura says, Mr. Lee, she's talking to me. Time in the age of Beckett was okay within weeks. Unless you owned a card shop, Laura, like I did, and a player would get hot the week after Beckett came out, and they got 3 weeks, and all you can charge is $5 for his rookie, because that's what Beckett said, and everybody lived by it. So I don't know that it was actually okay within weeks back then, but I get your point is well taken. Stuke said, hey guys, had to watch my Wolves beat the Lakers in game 1. Well, congrats on your win, Stukes. Lonely Basement Baseball Card said the quality of people are what made the trade night. Yeah, definitely. Lonely Basement says they say sick patch now. Yes, that's what a lot of us say now is sick patch. And Dan's Vintage here says, I realize this will come off as arrogant, but there was a level of wisdom and experience at the trade night you won't find at a modern event. I can see people taking exception with that comment. I think you do see some of it, but maybe not as much. It's probably a vastly a smaller amount of it, if I can say that without coming off that way, maybe. And Dave Marone says exclusive vintage rows are essential at Expo and National. So vintage only sections is what he's getting at there. All right, guys. So by the way, Mikey Singer from the Expo and Strongsville, who I call him the card show maestro, was supposed to join us. I'm marking him as absent now for the night. So why don't we bring on Josh now? Leighton, how's your time? Do you need to head off? I think you were limited to about 30 minutes.
5 minutes.
You're good to stay? Okay, so let's bring Josh on. You guys can say hello, and we'll continue. Josh, you ready? Please, everybody, please welcome Josh Madigan from the Hockey Cards Gong Show to Sports Cards Live 2.0. Josh, listen, Josh, you and I have done probably 90 episodes of content together. And yet I feel like I'm welcoming you here to the show, which I am. So welcome. How are you?
I'm good. I'm nervous. I have butterflies. Should I?
Oh, good. Good.
Okay.
Well, please.
Hi, Joe. Hi, Leighton.
Hey, Josh.
Breathe, Josh. Breathe.
It'll be okay.
Guys, what you may not know about Josh is that Josh pumps out about 6 hours of content a week on the Hockey Cards Gong Show podcast. Probably one of the better produced video podcasts out there, YouTube, with a bunch with spin-offs happening now. Great content coming out of the Gong Show. Really proud to have kind of been just, aligned with the Gong Show from very, very early on. And as I mentioned, Josh was my co-host. We did, I think it's 80 episodes of the Fanatics Weekly Hockey Show on Sundays, which we just stopped. And now I'm doing a multi-sport show by myself, and that's freed up Josh's Sunday night. So, but I'm happy to have you on this show, Josh. You were a guest on SCL 1.0 way back in time. I think we both had to remind ourselves of that. So
I still don't remember. So yeah. I'm just going to pretend this is my first time.
Yeah. Well, it's good to have you. It's good to have you back on the show. And I don't know, have you been listening to a little bit? Anything that's kind of stuck out in your mind for what we've talked about that you maybe had a thought or opinion on before we jump into another topic? I just want to give you a chance to maybe reflect on what you've heard us talking about so far. If not, that's fine too. But anything you want to kind of mention?
Yeah, I've been listening while working on our next show, and things that stood out to me on the card backs. It's like hockey has, I think, the most amazing vintage card backs with all the cartoons. Like, you mentioned that, and I think someone in the chat did. Those are pretty awesome. They were kind of wacky, which was the best, right? And I'll never forget, we had Ken Reed on our show, and that guy has memorized every card back of every vintage hockey card that he can pull a random, a Gilles Meloche from 1977 and tell you what the cartoon back was on the back of the card. So that's pretty awesome. And then as far as Leighton, what you're talking about, I think the answer is just knowledge, right? And the people that want, that's kind of why we do our show. It's I'm at the age where I'd be, if I wasn't doing a hockey card podcast, I'd be watching the History Channel and learning all about weird stuff. And, I think whether you're a vintage or modern collector, it's just the more, I'd say our show is mostly modern, but we do a Get to Know Your Hall of Famers segment every show where we go back and look at the history of hockey and the pioneers and the people that really created the game as a way to, because first of all, they have the craziest stories. It was not like professional sports in in the NHL in 1928 2008 was nothing like it is today. And we just think it's interesting, but, trying to tell those stories. I think, whether you want to learn more about modern or vintage, if you can get those stories, then I think that naturally creates interest.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Agree. Go ahead, Leighton.
Oh, I just wanted to say, I'm not sure, other than the book I started, Why the Strikes the Chord, but I wanted to share it with you, Josh, about the stories. It's not hockey, it's baseball. But a buddy of mine had recommended Glory of Their Times to me a long time ago. I didn't get a chance to start. I finally started it. I started it yesterday. I just finished chapter 1 about Rube Marquardt. And talk about stories. And of course, there's a lot of great stories, not just in baseball, but in hockey. And as you said, Josh, like if I wasn't doing this and my son was asleep, I'm not sure I'd be watching TV, right? The Lakers already lost. The Knicks game's over. I'd probably pick up the next chapter of the book to see which player it's going to be, because I was fascinated to learn that a guy who's in the Hall of Fame, the journey he took to just get into the sport of baseball by showing up like 5 or 6 days on a journey that he took from his parents' house as a 16-year-old when they thought he was 18 to make the major league. I mean, like, just fascinating stuff. And of course, that's just one random player. I know there's lots of great stuff in hockey. That's why I collect Howie Morenz. So, just wanted to kind of piggyback on that idea of, if you're not into the players and their stories, that's really where the magic is.
That's awesome. Yeah. Hockey, like what we've learned is, you look at the first 50 Hall of Famers, half of them, their career, they were playing hockey, and then, World War I happens, and now they're in France for 2 years. And then, now they're back and they're playing hockey again. And if you think about any athlete today, Victor Wembanyama going to war, next year for 3 years and then coming back to play basketball, it seems ridiculous, but that's what these guys did. And then, like, on the hockey side, then they would come back, and then it's like, Lester Patrick invented the blue line. And it's like, okay. Art Ross designed the puck. It's like, I guess that's important to the game. So
Yeah, it's good. It is awesome to learn about the history. And it's one of the reasons why I love vintage cards, is because it's a connection to the history of the game that we all love, whether it's baseball, hockey, basketball, football, or soccer, whatever it might be. The cards are that connection to it. And it's also our connection in many cases to the present. I was watching playoff hockey tonight. I was at a restaurant for dinner. Today is my mother's birthday, so it's a big birthday for my mother today. We had a nice dinner, and kind of watching hockey in the background, and that's a connection. That's a memory I'm going to have now. Winnipeg Jets, a team I'm hoping for, wins the game on her birthday, blah blah blah, and we can then supplement that with buying cards of modern players that we're watching. Like, I remember a couple Super Bowls ago, it was Joe Burrow against Matt Stafford. It was that one. And I had picked up at the local show the week before a rookie card of each of those guys. And I watched the Super Bowl in my basement with some friends, and I had their cards sitting on the TV table underneath my TV. And I could see the cards while I'm watching the game. I thought, this is going to be a memory of mine. And it was a memory that I planned on hanging on to for many years, until I somehow got into a big card last month that I need to now pay for. And those cards didn't make, those cards are getting sacrificed. I'm going to sever that memory as if it never happened by giving up those cards, but that's a whole other story right there. So I love cards, guys. I love cards. I love all the memories and connections that they provide. Never mind with the sports and history, but also with you guys and everybody in the chat as well. Okay. Joe, do you have anything to add on to all this?
Not particularly, no. Other than just, I wanted to acknowledge that I really, even though I don't follow hockey, I really love the Hockey Cards Gong Show, just because of the style of their content and the way that they embody a certain joy and hilarity with all that they do. And Josh, I haven't met you, but I've been following you for a while and really appreciate what y'all are up to.
That's nice.
Oh,
Joe.
thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, we try to have fun.
one of the things that I like about the Gong Show too, just expand on what Joe was saying, is that they don't take themselves too seriously, and which in a way ties into. And Josh, I'm sorry if I'm just going to kind of steal some of your elevator pitch here, but one of the things that Josh and the Gong Show have done is they, and I know this because Josh and I are friends. We talk a lot, and by calling themselves the Hockey Cards Gong Show, that kind of gave yourself some room to not get everything right all the time, to ask questions of your listeners, to learn on the go about things you may not know about. And it's just also natural and honest and authentic that it really, really resonates with their audience, who are, some of them are, way more experienced than they are in the hockey card hobby, but that's okay because they're not pretending to be anything that they're not. And they are. The other thing I want to say though is that how far I've noticed them come with their knowledge. Josh, especially, who's the longest standing member of the Gong Show now. There has been a little bit of turnover over the years now, Josh, I think I can say, but just the commitment to the hobby, to the craft, to the podcasting craft. It's like you said, Joe, it's a great listen. It's very, the production, the segments. Listen, guys, hopefully anyone who hasn't tuned in, even if you don't collect hockey, I still recommend listening to an episode or two of the Gong Show, and you can see what's possible out there for sports card podcasts, I guess you could say. Josh, I know it's a lot of flowers your way. If you'd like to accept them or not is up to you.
What do I owe you?
My invoice is in the mail.
The only thing I would say is that there's a principle I really believe very strongly in, is that I think expertise is the enemy of progress. I never want to be considered an expert in anything. The minute you consider yourself an expert, you stop learning. And the minute you stop learning, you actually become the farthest thing from an expert. Right. And so I'm a lifelong learner. I embrace that. I don't, you're right. I mean, we designed our show to have the freedom to be idiots, right? And do dumb stuff. We can't say hockey has like the most, every name is foreign and impossible to pronounce. And we're horrible at it. After 3 years, we haven't got any better at all. And it's just part of, I hope, our charm in a weird way. But yeah, I mean, that's our goal is to learn like everyone else and take them along for the ride. And that's the most fun. And actually it's freeing when you're not an expert. There's no pressure to be right.
And along with all that, though, is the fact that, the Gong Show, you run I want to say a tight ship. You don't run a tight ship, Josh, but you run a professional ship. Like, it is a very well done podcast. And, part of it is that it is the Gong Show. So you guys can do those things, but let's not take away that you are you and the team, you got a great mix there. You, Phil, and Louie. And then Phil has the spinoff Friday Nights with Phil, with California Dave and Hasselhoff, Phil's son. And I mean, the guests, it's just, it's a lot. It's a great community you're building, of course. And here, YKJP says, here, Jeremy, Hockey Cards Gong Show to the moon. If Turpin Force says, Phil, it's hilarious on the Gong Show. Yeah. It's a,
oh God.
Oh God. Yeah. I mean, Phil, I love Phil. Phil is, one thing I want to mention, not about Phil, but you said that, we're not really, we haven't gotten any better at names. Well, Johnny Busick is an all-time great of the Boston Bruins. And the first time I heard you say, I think it was like you guys said like Johnny Bucket
Bicycle or something. Yeah. Bucket,
probably. Yeah, you didn't know how to say it, and now you say it properly. So you have learned a lot and along the way. But again, a lot of it is players from the past, and so anyway, let's change it up for a moment here. Leighton, you are not going to be at the Expo, is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Oh, Leighton.
Yeah.
Shame on you.
Go ahead, buddy. Anything you want to say?
No, I'm taking my son to a really good friend's son's bar mitzvah, and then on Sunday I'm going to the Tops conference. So I have a good excuse.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, You do. Well, we'll miss you there. We'll miss you there, Leighton. Josh, you will be at the Expo, and we are going to have Mikey Singer on again, but he's marked absent tonight. He's a no-show. So let's just talk a bit about the Expo, Josh. Of course, I'm super pumped for it. I cannot wait. Leighton, wish you were there. Joe, can't wait to get you to an Expo, Joe, up to Canada one of these times. Josh, what are you most excited about for this year's Expo, or this year's spring Expo?
It's like my happy place. So I'm just excited to be there. I'm excited to see all my friends, right? It's like that. I mean, to me, the hobby is about people. And before I went on this crazy adventure, I'm not the most outgoing person. Like the thought of like me going to a trade show and meeting people and becoming friends or a card show was like, no, right? I'm kind of a stick to myself kind of person, but honestly, I'm so grateful that I forced myself out of my shell in that way, because now that's the one thing I look forward to. I think the second Expo I went to, I didn't buy a single card, and I had the best time.
Yeah. We were talking about earlier before you came on in the world of Strongsville. You know, it's these card shows have become so much more latent. I mean, and Joe, we all remember card shows from the 80s and 90s when it wasn't about going to see your friends. At least for me, it wasn't, because I didn't have many friends in the hobby in those years. I was kind of like a bit of a loner with a couple of friends that were into it as well. But, we were self-proclaimed nerds back then, still are, by the way. But it's really, going to these card shows has become so much more than just the cards. It is about it's about the time. It's about after the show and the meal time together and the lead up and the winding down for like Strongsville for a week of solid content from many different wonderful collectors. It's become a lot of that. And like you said, Josh, it's your happy place. It's certainly mine too. As soon as it ends, I can't wait for it to start up again. I can say the same thing about the National. I can say the same thing about all my favorite card shows. Once they end, I can't wait for the next one to start. Now, Josh, at the Fall Expo, you guys did a rip party at Chateau Gong Show. So, guys, what the Gong Show does is they rent an Airbnb, and they have a few of their producers and whomever staying with them, but they did this rip party where they invited 20 or 30 people in, and you guys did a ton of giveaways. Are you doing that again in the spring, or is that going to be a fall only sort of tradition? How are you operating that?
That's going to be fall only. Yeah, we didn't have the energy to do it this spring, and because we've been pretty busy with other stuff, and then we thought it'd be better once a year too. And we really we did it once. So we relied on the generosity of others. The whole point was to give back to the hobby. I think we gave away 25,000 in hobby boxes in one night. And it was crazy. It was a very humbling experience to be part of. But yeah, we're already planning Rip Party 2, which will be in November.
Rip Part. I was at the event, guys, and I can tell you, and they streamed it. It was so funny. They basically had like a production studio in the living room, 2 break stations and by break, I mean like these weren't like group breaks or anything. These were like people opening a box for themselves or opening them for the winners that were watching on YouTube at the time. Like, I know that it took you guys months, and then the postal strike happened up in Canada, so some of the shipments were delayed a little bit, but you guys got just about everything out that you could. If I don't know exactly, I'm assuming you got it all out. And it was just such a fun event to be at. I remember I left there at about, 12:30 at night, and you guys still had just stacks of wax to get there. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, these guys are going to be up for hours still having to break all this stuff and give it all away. I'm going to go get some sleep. And I abandoned you guys there, but it was such a great event that you guys that you ran that night, and I was just happy to be able to be there. Leighton, I know you're probably at the end of your run right now, so thank you for joining us and sticking around here and saying hello to Josh, and appreciate having you on the show as always, buddy.
Hi, Leighton.
Thanks for having me, guys. Look forward to seeing you guys soon.
All
Have a
right,
good weekend.
we will have you back soon for sure. So, Josh, you mentioned, you just let it slip. You said, we've been busy. We've been busy doing some other things as well.
Yeah.
The one thing that I'd like you to talk about and let people know about is your new website that you've built.
Mhm.
And I think it doesn't matter if you don't collect hockey, guys. You got to go have a look at this. But Josh, tell people what I'm talking about, and
Yes.
what spawned the idea for it, please.
Okay. Yeah, I'll start there. So our show is very research heavy, and we're always researching whether it's for vintage cards or modern, ultra modern, whatever it may be. And I've always been a checklist power user. And we had two options basically in the hockey. I don't know what it's like in other sports, Joe, like in basketball or but we had Beckett and Cardboard Connection. And I was team Cardboard Connection all the way, and then they went away. And I was sad because I just didn't like the Beckett interface as much, right? It's fine. It's not here to trash them or anything. But I spent 25 years in the corporate world before I had a midlife crisis and became a hockey podcaster, and did a lot of website and software development. And just the whole process of a checklist is super antiquated. It's like internet dinosaur stuff. Like if you think like when we scroll, I mean, you scroll, and then you go, crap, I gotta go back up at the top. Then I scroll. And I'm like, this is like internet 2002 kind of stuff. And so we built a checklist site, spent about a year, hired professional user interface, user experience designers, and really tried to create the modern checklist experience where on our site, you never have to scroll because there's search tools that we're building more powerful. There's drill down menus on hockeychecklist.com. So the idea is you should be able to instantly find what you're looking for. And then also provide a lot of information that current checklist sites don't have. Like in hockey, like we have a lot of thick patch cards because that's a big deal for us. And how many times you get a box and you pull like a really nice patch auto or something like that, and you want to put in a one touch, and like, I have no clue what size one touch I need for this card. Well, we have the thickness, as part of like a drill down into every card that, we're showing the point thickness for every card, and we're adding a whole bunch of other stuff too. And so the whole idea is to build a tool for the hobby that as hockey we're kind of the last to get stuff. We get the hand-me-downs for the hobby, so we're gonna have something nice for once.
Yeah. Well, yeah, great job on it. I know it's a lot of work uploading all the checklists, but you guys do have a Instagram account for the website, and you'll kind of announce or post up when new checklists are added. So I think it's great, man. I know that it's something that I'll be using quite a bit as it's built out and more checklists are added. It's already quite robust as it is. So check it out, guys. What's the website called, Josh?
It's hockeychecklist.com. Yeah. And so we're doing every new set going forward. We've done that since the first of the year. Then we're backloading. The idea is to have every set eventually on there. I think so. We launched on February 10th, and we just hit 100 checklists on the site. And so we're adding them. And yeah, it's like I said, it's a truly modern experience, and we're just trying to be 11.6% better than Beck.
There you go.
Our stated goal.
Now let's talk a bit about, because we see it in hockey a lot, and I think this will relate to the other sports as well, guys. And I know it because I was just looking at, I think, some 1998 Topps Chrome retro cards. There was a nice one to Bowman Yogi Berra was in the set. That's the one that caught my eye at first. Full size cards, regular size cards. So throwback cards. We're seeing for years now, like 15 years now, we see so many rehashes of old designs. And at first I really liked it. I thought, this is cool. That 0506 or that 0506, the cup design, or the 03 exquisite basketball design that we've seen done again. So LeBron's rookie year design has been now applied to cards from in the future. Well, in the future, more recently, and we see it kind of over and over again now. You know, in hockey, the 0506 Cup design has been given and used several times since then. I think they did it for the first time in 09-10. They did it in 13-14, 14-15, maybe 12-13 as well. I won't be surprised if they do it again. But I guess this isn't so much of a discuss. I have a question for you, Joe, Josh, and for the chat. But am I sort of alone in feeling like the more I see these old designs over and over again, and it's even seeing more of the so I might see 0506 over and over again, but now I'm seeing 07, 08, 08, 09, 09, 10, 10, 11. I'm seeing all of the designs again, and it's making me feel less love for the originals. And I never thought that would happen to me. You could probably watch me on this channel 4 years ago say, well, it'll never change how I feel about those originals because they're the originals. But now 5 years have gone by, and I'm kind of thinking to myself, like, I just, you know, the 0506 rookie design for the Cup, which is, I think, has been exploited more than the 0304 exquisite design has. Mm-hmm. I'm just like, I see an 0506, an actual 0506 RPA, and it doesn't really interest me anymore. I look at the Crosby and Ovechkin, they do stand out. They're iconic on their own, but the design is, I still like it, but I just don't feel the same way about it as I used to. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm leaning. So what does the chat think? Or anyone out there, especially if you follow hockey as close as Josh and I do, are you seeing it in other sports? Is it not? Am I overreacting? Should I kind of get a grip and be like, no, who cares? Let them do what they're, let those years do what they're doing. Stay in love with the original cards from the original years. I'm not really sure how to approach it. Before we go to you, Josh, I want to get Joe's thoughts because I kind of sprung this one on him right now. Joe, when I go through all this, where do you fall? What do you think?
Well, my corollary would be baseball and looking at, you know, how Topps is kind of releasing, you know, various like 70s, sometimes 80s issues, you know, with modern players. I tend to like it, and maybe I just don't have that much exposure to see that they're, you know, doubling, tripling, quadrupling the issues. If that's what's happening, I could see how that would kind of take some of the wind out of the sails, so to speak. But I tend to like it. But if I'm catching your drift, you're kind of saying it actually dampens your appreciation for the original. I hadn't really thought about that so much. You know, the card stock alone for me is significantly different. Like a 74 Topps, you know, I don't know, Pete Rose, you're just going to get a different feel of that than if you put a, you know, Ronald Acuna in there. So even though the image is the same, the texture of the card is different, which sounds, you know, now we're getting in the weeds, but I don't know. I don't know if it would rob me of the appreciation of the original, but I might say, okay, that was a cool idea. Maybe it's time to try something else.
Yeah, makes sense. Josh, thank you, Joe. Josh, where are you at on this right now?
Oh, I think it's a big issue, and I could point to a couple reasons that are, I think, contributing to what you're seeing and feeling. The first is, if you look at hockey in particular, there's a tribute problem that Upper Deck has, in that when they acquired OPG, they didn't acquire the designs for all the vintage cards. So really, tribute in hockey starts in 2005, right? I mean, so they have a very short look back window to go and pull designs from. So we're seeing a lot of repetition from that. Upper Deck can't make a 1971 tribute hockey card. They even though they own OPG, they don't own that design. That's a Topps design. And so again, that's a problem. I think that in addition to that, there's not enough of a macro level strategy that I don't think any of the card companies are using in protecting these assets, meaning that they're just too much, too often. They're being watered down. I like tributes, but I want to know that we're not going to see the same Connor McDavid tribute 4 years in a row, because at that point it's dumb, right? Now, and like the case is, and this is not necessarily a tribute case, but we've talked like a lot about how Upper Deck has really watered down some of their iconic card designs that they do own, that where we do have an advantage over something like we get jambalayas in hockey. We still get essential credentials in hockey. But when you have we still get PMGs. But when you have 4 PMGs for the same player every year, that's not good. And it's killed the value of those cards. When you have a McDavid jambalaya, but then there's also a version in his away uniform, and then the All-Star jambalaya, and then the E-Pack achievement jambalaya. Now a McDavid jambalaya is no longer special anymore.
Yeah. Brett S here says watered down, see jambalaya and PMGs. And Linda's first here says, what year did they reuse the 0506, the cup base set design? The RPAs, which are part of the base set, they reused them in this is 2009. So that's 2009. Have a look at there's the design. This is 2013, same design. And this is 2014, same design. Now, they're doing different players. So got to kind of be fair too, right? Like they're not releasing a 50-player checklist in 1 year and never doing it again. They're releasing them over different years. So it's a fine line, I think, to not overdo it. And it's funny. We then get the comment about PMGs and jambalayas, and like I was super passionate about those 2 insert sets for quite some time. Not as interested in them anymore.
Can I just ask you guys? I mean, have you held these cards in hand? Because like the other corollary I would have is like the 2011-12 Fleer Retro release, where they were doing re-releases of jambalayas or
essential credentials,
showcase stuff, the various issues that were so famous for the Fleer legacies, and the cards were thin, right? They did not in any way actually replicate the level of technical brilliance that some of these 90s cards had. Is that similar in the hockey, or is that are they
yeah, and I'm a Fleer guy, so I can, and Jeremy knows this too, but so you look at like a great example of what you're talking about, Joe, would be the Noise Boys card, right? Now, actually, if you talk to Gene McLeod, who is now, again, thankfully for us hockey folks, back at Upper Deck, when she designed that card in the 90s, you can bend it in half and touch both ends. And now who's going to do that to a Michael Jordan, right? I mean, it takes a lot of stones to do that one. And then when Noise Boys came back out, like in 2012 Fleer Retro for hockey, you could not do that. That would be a very bad idea. You're going to basically destroy the card. Well, she's back, and Gene, I think, did 23-24 Metal Universe for hockey. And so one of the big things for her was going back to some of those principles that you're referring to. So the Noise Boys from the most recent Metal Universe hockey set, you can bend in half again.
Wow.
That's
cool.
Really cool. Yeah, it's a very cool card saw. When I had Jean on Sports Cards Live, I mean, back in 2020, probably I had her on for the first time. She had one of the original Noise Boys, like unslabbed. We never see unslabbed Noise Boys, right? And she basically on the show took it and like, if this is, and just did that, and then it sprang back into shape, no creases, no wrinkles, nothing. You could basically bend that card in half and it would spring back into its original form.
I mean,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, it kind of cuts both ways. Like if I was, Players Theater,
Playmakers.
Playmakers Theater, thank you. That's the one I was looking for. Like I got one of those from the Retro brand, and I was sadly disappointed. But at the same time, if I owned a high-level Playmakers Theater, I'd probably be happy that they weren't exactly replicating it, because that makes the original more,
Sure.
more valuable, more, something you'll appreciate more. But yeah, I'm interested to hear more about what Upper Deck is up to with that, Josh, and how the technology, because I mean we've talked at different points with different card manufacturer people, and in some instances it's as simple as like truly like the presses and the materials that they had being almost impossible to duplicate, and that's a curiosity to me, as someone that's fascinated with cards, just like the actual production. And can you, even with as technical and as like sophisticated as we are, can you replicate the original? And then the second question is, would you want to replicate the original, or would that be actually be doing a disservice to the history of the hobby?
No, before you go, Joe, before you answer that, Josh, keep that in mind. I want to bring on Ben Hossler from Rolling Insights, because we're 10 minutes behind on bringing him on, and Chris HOJ is going to be here shortly. So we're gonna, Josh, I'll ask you to answer Joe's question. I want to do some comments. Ben, are you good to come on? Just join us on the screen. Yeah, okay. Let's bring Ben on, guys. Say hi to Ben Hossler from Rolling Insights. Hello.
Hey, Ben.
How we doing?
Good, bud. Welcome back. Long time. Nice to see you again.
It's been a minute.
It's been a minute, as the kids are saying these days. Yeah, welcome back, buddy. Okay, Josh and Ben, you've been listening along, so I'll let you continue to do that. We'll hear from you in a few minutes here. Josh, would you mind responding to Joe, because that was a great question?
Yeah, it is a great question, and it's actually I think the answer, Joe, is really counterintuitive. And the more you think we're in the most rapid rate of technological expansion that humanity has ever seen, when it comes to printing, it's going hard the other way. Print houses are closing on record numbers, and so it's harder. It's almost impossible to make some of these cards that they had in the 90s, because there aren't press operators. There's a lot of 18-year-old kids that are dying to become a press operator these days, and so you see like the manufacturers, they're having turf wars over who gets what print shops here in the US. Upper Decks had to go to Italy to get a lot of their stuff printed, and so in a weird way, and it seems like it shouldn't be possible or shouldn't be this way, it's actually a lot harder to produce more of these technically interesting cards than it was 20 years ago.
Right on. Okay. Thanks. Thank you, Josh. Okay, I want to do a few comments here, guys. First, there's a question for you, Josh. Mark Santucci says, what do you think about 1980-81 hockey cards? How do you like that set, Josh?
I love them. And, as you know very well, Jeremy, it's one of the more unique sort of juxtapositions between Topps and OPC, where you have the scratch off element on the top set that was distributed in the US and not on the OPC. And I think that other than having Wayne Gretzky's second year and of course the Mark Messier rookie, that makes those sets pretty awesome.
Definitely awesome. The professor said trade nights seem to provide liquidity from what I have heard. Is this one value we have touched on? I don't know that we touched on it tonight, but I think the professor makes a really good point that it does provide liquidity for people who don't have tables and booths at the shows. They can do it at the trade nights. LGC said vintage trade night is where a bunch of old men drop their car keys into a fishbowl. I don't know about that, but okay. LGC, thanks for popping in. Chris says cards make me feel like a kid again. Yeah, definitely. Maybe that's why, guys like me, like a bunch of us, but I think, I think they keep me young. I think a bunch of us probably feel that way. Michael Stone, good to see you, pal. Welcome. Robert Scott says, speaks again to the laziness and complacency of the card companies, fresh out of ideas. So I don't know. I'll push back a little bit on that one, Robert Scott, and I'll say that I think the card companies I think they need hits. They need pack hits, box hits, case hits. They need hits. in order to fuel the breaking community, which, as we've recently learned from, I think Michael Rubin said, 40% goes there. And that's just from the primary source. It's more than that afterwards. So because they do innovate in some other areas. So I don't think they're out of fresh ideas, because I've seen fresh ideas. I just wish they had more fresh ideas, perhaps, is where I'm coming from. Michael Stone here said, I like the release of older sets in inserts, like Joe is saying. As a base card, though, I tend to agree with Jeremy. James Wynn says, I like it and I hate it. Again, we're talking about the tribute stuff. Why? JP says the repeat era. I think that's clever, JP. Brett S says, watered down sea jambalayas and PMGs. That one I definitely agree with. Stone Collector here says, I like the rehashed Topps designs, but Topps has been overdoing it. You have archives every second year, Heritage 35-year, Silver Packs, now Platinum, Chrome Anniversary, etc. Yeah, I think that is a bit much. Bob Boozle says, look at it like a living set that continues in perpetuity. That's a good way to look at it. Bob Boozle, thank you. Carlo says, no longer special now, but nobody can see into the future. Nobody knows what collectors might find appealing 20 years from now. I think that's a great comment there from Carlo, because it's true. And I think I find myself trying to think about that. What is coming out today in some of these newer products that might be appreciated down the road? In the event I might want to speculate a little bit, collect them in the meantime if I also like them, but also feel like, hey, maybe these will be good down the road when it comes time to dispose of them from a financial perspective. Brett S said, the fatigue of the former designs has me looking at first year new stuff like doubloons, Dion's, 16 bits, and rare EPAC parallels. That's how I think that's the savvy play in a lot of ways, is picking up the first issue or the first year of a cool insert. And I think doubloons are awesome. I picked up a McDavid not too long ago myself. And then Otani PSA 10 says, I personally love when retro cards are as similar as the 90s cards. I hate it when they miss the mark. Doesn't devalue the original because they're using modern players. So I disagree. I'm not exactly sure what you're disagreeing with, because that makes sense to me. But appreciate the comment, Otani PSA 10. And I do get what you're saying. And I think that's a very healthy outlook. So kudos to you for having it, for sure. All right. Carlo here says, downtowns and kabooms are the most popular cars in the hobby. Why? Because other people chase them. Yeah, but hard to have forecasted that right out of the gate, right? Okay. All right. Good. We've got Chris HOJ in the back. We got Ben Hossler on with us. Josh, before I let you go, and before we go to Ben and bring Chris on as well, I want to talk a bit, just share some Expo events with you and everybody else. You'll know about these, but guys, I want to let everybody know. I want to pump up the Expo a bit, because I'm super pumped for it. So first of all, guys, I want to share the autograph guests with you. We'll just go through it really quick. You got a referee, Andy Van Hellemond. You got Phil Kessel. Fergie Jenkins is coming. Mike Foligno, Antonio Davis, RJ Barrett, Dennis Hextall, Natalie Spooner, Mike Vernon, Billy Harris, Lawrence Taylor, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, Mark Giordano. We got Mike Walton, John Anderson, Eric Lindros, Jerry Cheevers, Gilles Greton, Ron Lowe, Ron Tugnut, Vincent Damphus, Angela Regario, U.S. hockey star, Larry Murphy, Jeff Fry, Dominic Hasek, Mike Richter, Bernie Perron, Alan Bester, Dave Keon, Tiger Williams, Raymond Bork, Paul Henderson, Kelly Gruber, third baseman for the world champion Toronto Blue Jays. We have Daryl Sittler, Rick Vive, Doug Gilmore, and Wendell Clark. Unfortunately, Damon Stoudemire had to cancel, but there's the list of autograph guests at the Ultra Pro Pavilion next weekend in Toronto, guys. Thursday night is the event that I am now co-hosting with GP Sports Cards and Total Sports. Hobby Social Night. Appetizers are provided by Upper Deck. And we have a bigger venue this time. It's at Arizona Grill and Lounge on 215 Claringview. You can find this on this piece here. This poster is on the Expo website, sportcardexpo.com. That's Thursday night. Friday night, we've got the VIP after party presented by Slab Sharks, hosted by CSC with host Dr. Collectible, recently on our show, will be there as well. That's the Friday night after the show ends. That is in the show venue as well. So the VIP Expo after party is on Friday night. And then Saturday is the trade night after party presented by the Expo and Mint Inc. Tickets are $5, but don't let that offend you guys, because it is all donated and matched by Mint Inc. for the Mackenzie Mental Health Foundation. Last year, I donated some money to the foundation, in addition to my ticket, because I wanted to help out, and, it's an issue close to me. And so that Saturday night is the official trade night after party, also at the venue. And I'm excited for that. And one of our Sports Cards Live partners here, Mint Inc., is hosting it as well. So if you're in the area, if you're going to be at the show, guys, try to come out to the social night, the one that I'm hosting, the after party by CSC and Slab Sharks, and the trade night after party by the Expo itself and Mint Inc., presented by CGC Trading Cards as well. And you can see Upper Deck, Slab Sharks, eBay, Pather, and I can't read what that one is there, but lots of other people taking part, guys. So that's what's going on. I just wanted to share that here, everybody, and get us all, especially me, a little bit more excited for the Expo. Josh, am I going to see you at these events?
Oh yeah, we'll be there.
Awesome. Cannot wait. Okay, Josh, thank you. We'll get you back again. I feel like this was a little bit quick, but we'll get you back on the show again. I also want to get Louie on here and Phil as well in due course. California Dave, we'll get you all on here in the future. So thanks for coming on, buddy. Appreciate it. It's great to have you back on the channel.
Thank you for having me. Great to meet you, Joe. Nice to meet you, Ben. And we'll see you in a few days, Jeremy.
Can't wait. Take care. Safe travels.
Fun hanging out.
Guys.
Take care.
All right, guys. Ben, how are you, dude? I mean, we were having you on a couple times a month. We're going to go down. I think we're going to have you on about once a month now. And I'm really impressed with what you put together tonight for us. We'll bring Chris on too, because you're going to be talking about running backs tonight. And I know Chris is a big collector of one of the top running backs in the league. So he's going to be great to have on. Joe, are you excited for this?
Absolutely.
Because you're a 49ers fan, if I'm not mistaken.
I am. And I'm also an aficionado of just the draft, even though I don't really follow it like the last 10 days before any draft. Actually, NBA and NFL, I don't really do baseball, but NBA and NFL, I do like a deep, it's almost like cramming for finals. I feel like, okay, I've got to know so that I can appreciate the unfolding of these GMs that get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to make these decisions. So I'm excited for this conversation.
Right on, right on. I want to, Otani PSA 10 shouts out Hasek and Lindros. And yes, and I'm going to be interviewing Dominic Hasek on the eBay stage on whichever day it is. I'm not sure. I'm scheduled to also host a Q&A with Eric Lindros. If he's going to do it, I think that's up in the air. I'm going to be interviewing Raymond Bork on one of the days, Mike Richter, Mark Giordano. I know Josh is going to be interviewing one of the signers as well. He's not here to remind me who he'll be talking to, along with some other people who will be hosting some panels. I'll be hosting a panel on the Thursday, and there's other people that are doing sort of stage work along with myself. So it's going to be great at Expo. Bob Boozle says, what kind of drip Jeremy is going to be wearing to the after party? I got to tell you, Bob, the word drip is it's a great word. It's one that I am familiar with. And Karn Rai, who is, the founder, one of the founders of Slab Sharks, and a bit of a hobby legend, my buddy Karn, he liked what I was wearing one night. I saw him, so he started calling me Drippy Lee. So I got some drip, Bob Boozle. I got some drip. What it'll be exactly, I'm not sure yet. Joe, why are you shaking your head?
I mean, yeah, you should get.
You're 50, Jeremy. What are you talking drip for?
Get some drip. You should get some drip. I'm all for drip, and yeah, rock it.
Hey, Greg Conan, though. What's up, Greg? Good to see. Greg here said, back in the old days, most of the cost went into technology. Now it goes into royalties auto. So Greg Cohn has been on the show not too long ago, and he is a senior guy at Leaf Trading Cards, worked at Upper Deck as well for a long time, ran the football department there, I think, the football brand, was the senior brand manager, I believe. And so when he says this is really interesting. You got, this is right. And he's very succinct in what I think I was also trying to say earlier was, now it's expensive to make cards. They have to pay the royalties. So they can't invest as much into the technology. And that's unfortunate, but that's part of the business model of sports cards right now. So no, Mark, I will not be interviewing Daryl Sittler. I was not, my shoulder was not tapped for him. I'm not even, did I read his name? Is he one of the autograph guests? I don't even remember if I was reading them all so quickly there. If he's even, did I say Daryl Sittler? Yes, I did at the end. Yeah, no, not me. Yeah, Curtis Joseph was on for sure. Yes, he is. Oh, is Curtis Joseph who Josh is talking to? Thank you, Louis, for that. Okay. Ben, is there anything that you want to mention before we bring Chris on? Anything new at Rolling Insights happening that people should know about? Rolling Insights, of course, a sponsor of Sports Cards Live, not directly in the sports card business, but a nice parallel sort of tool that you can use to get information about players you might be thinking about buying cards of if you want to know how they rank against others, and especially based on card pricing, which is what Ben has worked into some of his data spaces on Rolling Insights. But Ben, that's enough for me. Anything you'd like to mention? Then we'll bring on Chris and we'll get into the meat and potatoes of it.
Yeah, just continuing to, work on stuff on the back end. We're doing some improvements to the website and different stuff coming in the next few weeks and few months leading into NFL season. We do have the custom data upload, which I've used, in the past few data spaces I've shown off on the show. So that's available fully to the public now. So anyone that has, a free account and goes in, plays around with the data spaces, they can export that to a CSV. And if they want to put their own, stats or something that we don't have available currently, if they want to put that in there, they're free and able to do that. And Joe, I know some kids that would consider that Sprite hat you're wearing drip. So don't sell yourself too short there.
Joe's got the drip. I need that hat, Joe.
Hey, Target has a lot of options. And if you hit it on the right day, you might get lucky.
Well, there's a bit of meaning behind that Sprite hat on his head anyway that ties into the early episodes of Sports Cards Live 2.0. Why, Kate, did we miss Mikey? Yeah, he's on the thumbnail. He just no-showed us tonight, unfortunately, so we did not miss him. I'm going to remove him from the thumbnail after the show. I don't want to mislead. Okay. Chris, you ready? 2 thumbs up. I like to bring you on with I like to bring you on with the thumbs still up. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing well. Great show tonight. I loved all the segments, but that stuff Iowa Dave was talking about always gets me going. About what rules should we use, if any, when collecting, what are our approaches, and so on and so forth. I have some notes that we can get to later. But if we have time. But in the words of one of the great card shop owners and breakers, one of the great, Big W, it's good to be back.
We were off for a week. It's good to have you back. I'm glad you are available and continue to be, Chris. It's great to have you back. Cutie DJ, meat and potatoes. That's right, meat and potatoes. Welcome to the show, Cutie DJ. GC says, "Where's Stiff?" Everybody, Stiff, by the way, is Chris's actual brother. Stiff Arm Wax. Nick, great guy.
No. HOJ's Stiff's brother. Sorry.
There you go. I remember I was doing podcasts at a podcast studio at the National. I think it was 2021 Atlantic City again. I had a few windows and I could invite whoever I wanted in. I think I forget which one it was, but in any event, I said I went over to you, Chris. You were with Christina. You were with Stiff. You were probably with Josh. I forget exactly. And I invited Stiff to come into the podcast studio with me. And I think you guys were like, not Chris. Like, no, I've talked to Chris a million times. Let's get Stiff on. Let's get a conversation with Stiff Arm Wax. So we did Stiff, and there he is. He's in the chat right now. Good. Oh, Rippin' List is here as well. What's going on? What a great time to be in the hobby. All right. So, Chris, let's jump in and talk about the data space that Ben put together, because I did kind of give you a preview of it. I forwarded it on to you and Joe. So why don't we share the screen and we'll ask Ben to take us through it. And guys, I mean, listen, this is the kind of thing that Rolling Insights can do. You may not be a football fan. Most of you probably are. And we're looking at running backs today, which I think is awesome, because sort of unlike baseball where pitchers don't get much love, in football, the quarterbacks get all the love. The guys throwing the ball get all the love, and running backs, they do get love for sure, but not as much as quarterbacks. So I think this is a great mix. And this is not a very deep list. There's only 7 players on it. So I like that, Ben. It's very consumable. So I'm going to put it on the screen, Ben, and can you take us through what it is that you've built here?
Yeah, so I'm of the belief that we're about to enter a running back renaissance in the NFL. So we saw this a little bit in this 2017 draft class that I pulled up. I mean, just look at the list of names here. This is basically all of the good running backs, of the last 5 years. They all came out in the same draft class. It was very historic. And if you look at how teams have schemed their defense for the last 4 to 5 years with how pass happy the league has gone, teams have in the last year or two started to take advantage of this. Like, a lot of teams go off-ball linebacker defensively. They have light, linebackers and defensive players to keep up with mobile quarterbacks and how good the receivers are. And the opposing offenses can take advantage of that by just simply running the ball instead of, going pass happy. And we've seen this with the Eagles, going out and getting Saquon Barkley. Obviously, the Baltimore Ravens went out and they got Derrick Henry. Those are 2 very analytically advanced teams when you look at the grand scheme of the NFL. So I think that we could start to see running backs kind of make a little bit of a comeback. And it coincides with what is going to be another historic draft class, in my opinion, a week from, last Thursday, basically, this upcoming week. So I went back, pulled up the 2017 draft class, and kind of weighted out their performance year by year. So all the way back to 2017, I weighted out their performance, very baseline stat of this running back score, but just to get an idea. And then I averaged it out for their career, coincided with their 2017, I think it was the Prism Silver and a PSA 10. Just wanted to get a base idea. And then I also put up their career average PPR points per game, because I know Chris has talked about that previously as well. So just to get an idea of that. And I think it presents a lot of interesting conversations for me to ask Chris and you guys both as well. What would the market be for investing in these running back cards? Because it's kind of become a devalued position for a while now, but can we get ahead of that if I think, if I'm right that it's going to switch back a little bit, moving forward?
Well, I'm not going to answer the question because I'm not sure of the answer to it. But when I look at this list, and I don't recognize all the names, but I certainly recognize Christian McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara, Kareem Hunt. I think I recognize Aaron Jones. I'm not even sure. But I don't follow Joe Mixon. I recognize the name Joe Mixon, definitely. But the ones that really stick out to me, and it's maybe because of the content I consume, I just know Christian McCaffrey is a very recognizable and common name in hobby circles right now, Ben. Alvin Kamara, I think the only reason I know that name is because Dustin from the Sports Card Dad is a New Orleans Saints fan, and a couple of years ago, all he was talking about was Alvin Kamara. Oh, he's still on the Saints, I see, so that's good at least, which is pretty funny that way. But that's why I know about these guys, because of hobby content. So I'll put it to, I don't know who wants to go first on this. Joe, if you do, because your mic is off. Do you want to mention anything, and then we can go to you, Chris, and then back to you, Ben?
So you're passing it to me. I mean, I'm appreciative that you framed the conversation with the larger dynamic of what NFL offenses might be considering. That's not something that I was necessarily aware of, but it does get me excited to imagine, an opportunity, especially from a sports card perspective of, what might emerge. The very first thought that goes through my mind, which I think has some connection to the sports card world, is that, and the NFL world for that matter, is that running backs have typically, had a shelf life, if you will. I mean, they get banged up so much that I think it becomes challenging to reconcile the immediacy of their impact or their productivity for any one particular team with a larger career impact that might influence long-term collectability. And that's actually something Chris and I have talked about in a slightly different context. How much is cumulative stats important versus, sort of a shooting star, the brilliance of 4 to 6 years or 6 to 10 years, depending on the sport. But in the NFL, I think it is very challenging for running backs to sustain that kind of level of brilliance, simply because people are going after them and they're getting hit hard, and there's concussions and there's knees and there's really strong human beings that are doing their best to take them down. So that's a component, and that leads a little bit into just the one thing I'll say about McCaffrey that I think makes him exceptional is his diversity of productivity, and by that I mean he is not only good in the trenches, not only good around the edge, but amazing in terms of just being able to get open in the flat and having kind of an access. And of course, Purdy and him have a synergy too that I think works well. I'm sure Chris has some thoughts on that. So, I mean, that's what gets me excited about this, just seeing McCaffrey. I'm familiar with all these names because I do play fantasy football, and all of these players at some point I've had on a team at some point. It looks kind of like Kareem Hunt might be a little bit in the mode of a bit of a comeback. So possible value there. But again, everything has to be predicated, I think, around health and where a player is in terms of their capacity to continue to produce at a level that will land them in a place or in a conversation with all-time greats or even contemporary greats.
Lots there. Any kind of response to that from you, Chris?
Yeah, I thought those were all amazing points. And I'll just kind of bring us back, maybe circle around to the hobby pricing of it all. One of the reasons why collecting running backs was and still is really appealing to me is because they are cheaper. They're a lot cheaper. So like we're looking at the 2017 Prism base, but it was a silver. So whether you want to call it a silver base, that PSA 10, you have McCaffrey and Kamara and these guys, and like, the range is like $20 to $120. The Mahomes PSA 10, even after the Super Bowl loss, is like $4,500, and he's from that 2017 class as well. So like that's the we're talking about, a 40 to 80x multiplier or more between being able to collect, some really cool running backs versus Mahomes. Now, I'm not saying these guys should be more than that. I'm not saying these guys deserve to be more than a 40th to an 80th of Mahomes. I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is that they're really cheap compared to the alternatives of trying to collect a Mahomes or, these great historic quarterbacks of this era. So that's what always appealed to me about running backs, that they're really exciting. They're They are names that are always relevant in fantasy, especially the dual threat running backs. Like McCaffrey, I mean, I would have to look it up, but I think he's probably been the consensus overall number one draft pick in various fantasy formats, probably 4 or 5 different years. So like you spend a whole offseason hearing about how awesome McCaffrey is, and it like starts to stick. And you're like, you know what? That's pretty cool, man. If I can pick up a couple of these guys' cards for about a 50th of what the Mahomes equivalent goes for. And then that's the final point here on like the pricing of it all, is that these guys have awesome cards. You know, all these guys have, or at least most of them have, like, for example, the Immaculate Premium Patch Shield Autograph 1/1. That's a sick insert from Immaculate. It's got a big fat NFL shiny shield on it. It's got a beautiful bold autograph. It's a 1/1. I mean, that's just like such an awesome card from this era. And you could go pick up the Joe Mixon probably for like $1,000 or something like that, maybe even less. I mean, the opportunity to like collect cool cards of impactful players who we got to watch during this golden era of fantasy, and to do it at a real discount, you know, to me, that's always been the appeal of collecting running backs.
Right. You know, I have a few things I want to mention, and comments I want to bring into this too. So you mentioned, Chris just mentioned, you know, that 40 to 80x value from or more from Mahomes down to McCaffrey. On the other side of that, McCaffrey is like almost selling for 3 times as much as Aaron Jones, the next highest guy on this list, $125 to $45. Is Christian McCaffrey 3 times as good as Aaron Jones and more than that of the rest of the guys on this list? Not looking for an answer to that. It doesn't really matter, right? Because the other thing is a lot of it because of the market that they play in. You know, McCaffrey's playing for the 49ers. We got the Vikings and the Saints. I know both those teams have a lot of fans, but do they have as many fans as the 49ers? Do they have a third of the fans as the 49ers? I don't know. Because someone made a comment that's like, you know, the hobby, I don't know if I can find the comment quickly here, but it says it's a popularity contest, you know? So do the stats really matter? Here it is. Stone Collectors, sports cards is a popularity contest. All these stats don't really matter. Well, I'll push back a little bit on that because he's right to a degree. I'm not saying Stone Collector's wrong. When I say I'm going to push back, it's simply that all players have some collectors. Maybe not all, but like most players have some collectors. And especially if you live in Kansas City, Arizona, Dallas, Houston, New Orleans, or Minnesota, never mind McCaffrey and Sam, people are collecting these players, and they do want to know how the stats are lining up if they're not already looking at them. So I don't know that these stats don't matter, but maybe on Instagram they don't matter. You know, maybe on hobby content they don't, but they do matter to the collectors in those regions. Guaranteed they matter to those guys who can then compare them to stats of their team's running back from the previous era or a couple before. The stats do matter, I would argue. But if we are simply collecting the GOATs, then you're right, they don't matter. But the GOATs aren't all the people collect. And that's what Instagram may have you believe otherwise, but it's just not actually the case, in my opinion, and from people that I've gone and talked to. Michael Stone did say, oh yeah, quarterbacks and wide receivers stick around a lot longer. And then Carlo here says analytics and sports cards should never mix, except when it comes to how many first round players go bust. Again, I'll just say the same thing I said to the last comment, is that no, I think that they should mix, because, and I mean, Chris has made a career out of card stats, but on his Instagram, what is it called, Chris? Is it Spreadsheet Tuesday or Statistical Tuesdays, when you put out a series of story posts talking about players and their statistics and why they do matter? So I'm going to take the opposite approach and say they do matter. Chris, can you respond to all that there? And then let's get Ben's take on all this.
Oh, yeah. No, I totally get where those comments are coming from. You know, popularity is the mechanism. I especially think the mechanism, even more so than popularity, is just like news cycle, newsworthiness. You know, how many times on ESPN am I going to hear about this player? I think that is like definitely the bottleneck. And if you're a player, no matter how good your stats are, if you're not making highlight reels, if you're not newsworthy, if you're not being discussed regularly in either hobby circles or in mainstream sports circles or both, then it's going to be really hard to get traction and visibility in the hobby. However, with that said, I then pose the question, well, what makes a player popular? Why is a player going to show up on ESPN? Why are we going to talk about a player in the hobby news circles and in the local card shop and at the trade night? Well, it's not the only factor, but one of the big factors is stats. If you're a running back who's, putting up 150 yards of total offense every week and you're scoring 20 to 25 PPR fantasy points every week for a few seasons, you're going to be one of the most hotly desired fantasy players, period. And if you reach that status where you're, a must draft, a lock, a first round lock, people are going to talk about you. Fantasy shows are going to talk about you. ESPN's going to talk about you. Hobby circles are probably going to talk about you too. So I do agree that popularity is the bottleneck. Like if you're not popular, if you're not talked about, if you're not a subject of the hobby and sports news as an athlete, you're not going to get a lot of visibility in the hobby. But I think one of the ways that you can get to that status is by putting up exceptional stats.
Makes sense to me. Ben, what do you want? You've taken a lot in now. What are you thinking?
Yeah, Chris said it perfectly. Definitely agree that popularity and who plays for what team is important. But like Chris said, which I'll echo as well, whoever puts up good stats also has a very good chance to become a popular player. And that's sort of what I'm looking at here. Like, I'm not coming on the show telling everyone that, we should buy these cards or anything like that. I'm simply just being an outsider and, looking at the data. And another point that I think is interesting is what Chris brought up as well with fantasy football. I think people are underrating that factor, specifically when it comes to the NFL. And it's not something that we have any data on because it's still a relatively new thing. But the NFL has absolutely exploded in popularity in the last 10 years relative to 20, 30 years ago. Not saying it wasn't popular than it was, but a large part of why the NFL is so much more popular right now than the NBA and the MLB is fantasy football. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. If anything, it's just going to increase. And so I do think maybe 30 years from now, will there be a bigger crossover between people collecting cards and fantasy football? There could be. I don't know, but it's definitely in the cards of something that could happen.
Yeah, fair. Joe, how about you? You got anything to add?
Yeah, just real quick. I mean, kind of what you were saying too, Jeremy, in terms of things that amplify a player's collectability is, not just location of markets, like, maybe the West Coast is a bigger area or bigger region, but team success. And I've seen that. In fact, team success has actually led me to collect certain players. When a player gets to the Super Bowl, maybe occasionally a running back wins an MVP in a Super Bowl, or, has a special performance on the way to that. That really generates a lot of traction, not only within the region in which that player might be collected, but also sort of the external. And when you get those kind of interlopers coming in to a player's market that aren't necessarily a team collector, but are appreciating the fact that this running back is helping a team, a franchise get to the promised land, that makes a huge difference. And just going back to basics, I mean, I don't know, I played football. Generally speaking, running backs were kind of the best player. I mean, maybe the wide receiver was fast, and the quarterback was skilled, but the running back was usually the player who had the most athleticism. And for that reason, I've always appreciated both the value and also the performance of running backs on football teams.
Yeah, I mean, that's all great points there. I want to go to a couple comments here. First one here, I'll just Ben, I switched to your screen. I don't know if you noticed that I switched to your screen midway there. Fine. But the first one I want to go to is Otani PSA 10 says Emmitt Smith stuff in a PSA 10 are bargain bin prices, so I have zero hope for these names. Okay, so let's put that to the test and let's look at Emmitt Smith prices in PSA 10s. Trusty card ladder here, sales history. This I searched Emmitt Smith PSA 10 by price. I mean, these are some great cards, but $18,422, $10,106, $8,099, $7,500, and so on. I don't know, but to me, those are not what Ohtani PSA 10 called bargain bin prices. $4,076. Like, I don't know. These are some pretty healthy numbers here. I'm still scrolling. I don't know how many cards there are, but that's, and so there. I mean, those are not bargain bin prices, and I my finger's getting tired from scrolling all the way down. So I'm just gonna, say that this comment's just not true for all the cards. It's a generalization. This comment is now false. Okay, Stone Collector says John Stockton was never popular. He put up great stats. His cards are worth boo-boo. Okay, John Stockton, organized by price, using trusty card ladder. Thank you, Chris and team. $52,800, $43,000. Now, those are duels with other players, but this isn't $30,000 for a John Stockton card. $26,000, $20,000, $20,000, $19,000, $18,000. These are not bargain bin or boo-boo, whatever Stone Collector put it as worth boo-boo. I appreciate the self-censorship there too, Stone Collector. But these are not low prices. So even a guy like John Stockton has some. Now, it's not all cards, and neither for Emmitt Smith. Not only do you need to, so I think I made my point there, guys. Not only do you need to consider the player's stats, but to say that stats don't matter because only all anyone wants to collect is Michael Jordan is just false. That is, I'm comfortable saying that's false. This is not an opinion. This is fact. That is false. But consider the player's stats in some cases, and then you have to go deeper. And this is where experience and savviness and all that takes place. Is what are the cards? What are the cards to go for? And this is where the deeper hobby conversation goes. And I know Chris loves this line of discussion. It's probably one of his favorite lines of discussion is what are the cards? And this brings me to something that I wasn't sure we were going to really have time for tonight, but it brings me to this post here. Let me just switch back. This post here that came from one of my favorite new Instagram accounts, The Smarter Collector. And he's been on the show here with us as well. But the sports card value hierarchy, the driver hierarchy. And I don't see, player, this is, I'm just going to show this for a second because this is a whole thing. But when we're looking at sports cards, you need to think about it this way. Some sort of a structure or a hierarchy. And I know Chris right? Yeah, he loves this kind of discussion. But the player is, I believe the player is the number one most important thing. Where I think the Smarter Collector, and this may apply to some cards, I don't think grade is the second place thing. Personally, I put scarcity, rarity, and set and brand prestige above it. But it's set and brand prestige that I'm talking about when I say that there are players who are not the best that have a deep collector base, but they focus on a smaller amount of cards when it comes to value. But don't get me wrong, they will put together a 2,000 card binder with these players too, some of whom we've never really heard of, that aren't even, that are not widely collected. You wouldn't believe they have player collectors, yet they do. The hobby is so much deeper than Instagram and YouTube and Twitter will have you believe. Just, it's just the way, that's just the fact of it all, guys, in my opinion. Kind of went off on a tangent there. Chris, you want to respond to that at all?
Oh, yeah. I love that pyramid hierarchy post. Don't have to agree with his pyramid or hierarchy. I just think it's inspirational to do that all for ourselves. We all could have fun going through that thought experiment to sort of figure out what we think matters most to market pricing. Because there's always going to be examples that, like, I agree, player first, but I'll tell you this, I can find John Stockton cards that sell for more than Michael Jordan cards because the Stockton is super rare and comes from a very cherished set, and the Michael Jordan card isn't as rare and doesn't come from as important of a set. So, there's so many different ways to look at it. It's such a fun thought experiment. Love thinking about that type of stuff for sure, Jeremy.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, and, Otani says, of course, you're going to find some of these players that have cards like that because the card is scarce. Sure. But you're also going to find the player collectors for those guys as well. You just are. I know some of them personally. Another comment, Vintage asked this question. That was a good question. Why are 90s inserts of Barry Sanders and Jerry Rice more valuable than Brett Favre, Elway, and Marino? What changed that made quarterback values king now? And I'm going to throw my response, and I want to hear from you guys as well. But I'm thinking, well, it's not that quarterbacks. Well, first of all, it's not really. I don't know if this is a consistent question. Why are 90s inserts of Barry Sanders and Jerry Rice more valuable than those three quarterbacks? And that's because I think Barry Sanders by many is considered the GOAT of running backs. Jerry Rice by even more people is considered the GOAT of receivers, whereas Favre, Elway, and Marino are not considered the GOATs, the top GOATs of quarterbacks. That prestigious title belongs to really Brady, Montana, and Manning, as far as I'm aware. So I think that's why. I think Rice and Sanders have distanced themselves from the others at their position. Okay, am I right? Joe, let's go to you. What do you think? Is that right, or am I missing something there?
No, I'm guessing that the questioner sort of was going in the direction of why position players might be supplanting some quarterbacks, and I think, yeah, the pyramid, like where you are in your position pyramid, probably has a lot to do with that. I wouldn't mind turning the conversation back just a little bit to the explosion of the popularity of the NFL. And I'm sort of in my own way questioning some of my collecting habits right now because there are moments where I feel like the NFL just has so much more of an on-ramp or a possibility, given some of the dynamics and the context behind it being a sport that is I don't know, I don't want to sound nationalistic, but decidedly American, and something. I mean, with an international audience. Like, I'm not saying that, but it's not necessarily something that anyone is playing anywhere else. I mean, they're playing games in London, maybe in Germany, but I'm not sure how many young people are playing organized football. And I'm just thinking about how much room there is for the NFL to grow entertainment, and then of course as the trickle down the sports card market. And I don't know, I found what Ben was saying to be very compelling, and I know I've heard HOJ at different points mention that we might look back at this time period as the golden age of football / Prism football, because of key players, like certain, seminal players, a la Mahomes, who will kind of anchor a whole product line, if you will. And from there, there's an ecosystem that develops. So I don't know. I'm just thinking a lot about football, and it's also the case that, there's 82 games in basketball, NBA regular season. There's 162 in baseball. That's a lot for a human being in 2025 to keep track of. Once a week for a number of months of football, it really allows people. I mean, it's tantamount to a religious observation. Sunday football, get on your red zone, check out your fantasy team, make your last minute adjustments, and I think that cannot be underestimated at this moment in terms of how it influences, interest in card assets of football players.
Mm-hmm. I just want to make a point. You mentioned, the length of the seasons, and then I think about the length of the average career length for these players. Football players' careers are so short. Never mind, they're already short, probably the shortest careers there are out of like the 4 major North American sports. But if you actually then drill down into the amount of games they get out of their careers, I mean, football's going to be even lower on the totem pole because they're only playing 17 games a season now, right? So what's the average career under 4 years in NFL football? So the average player maybe plays 60 games in their career, whereas in baseball, for sure, it's they play that many in 2 months, and in hockey and basketball, they play that many in three quarters of one season. So football is, I don't know what that means. I'm going to push that to Chris now, and I want to hear you too, Ben. But Chris, let's go to you. What does that really mean that we see so much less of a football player than we do of someone from the other sports? Now, some careers go long. Brady played for a long time. Some players will play for 20 years, but that's the exception, not the rule, I believe. I don't know what it means. Does anyone know what does that mean from a card collecting standpoint? Chris, you want to take first crack at that?
Yeah, well, I think Joe said stuff that I agree with strongly. And one of the reasons why I started collecting Patrick Mahomes, in addition to McCaffrey and Le'Veon Bell, is because I think there's a real chance that Mahomes is going to be the most important athlete of the entire Panini era. So, and that includes all the sports. So I want to be a part of that hobby tradition if it does become that. And I think there's a decent chance it will. But having said that, Jeremy, now I'm going to play devil's advocate, okay? Just for fun, for sport. These aren't necessarily how I feel, but I think this can be some pushback. And Jeremy, I like the pushback you made too, which is that, well, we're only looking at these players, one time a week. And my pushback kind of relates to that, which is how much of football fandom is just casual and passive and most importantly, transactional. How much of football fandom is just, the guy at work that you're buddies with who doesn't really care about the sport, but who is interested in competing in fantasy. So, he does the research, he takes an interest, he wants to be a part of this group, but does he love football? Does he care about these players? If it's Christian McCaffrey one year and then it's Bijan Robinson the next year, does he care that it's this guy versus the other guy? Or is it just names on a spreadsheet that is just trying to help him not have to suffer the penalty of losing in his fantasy league at work? So I think there's some pushback there. It's like how much of football fandom is the passionate diehard fandom that we see, you had Josh Madigan on, that we see from hockey fans like himself. That fan might be worth 100 casual football fans in terms of revenue to the league, in terms of content creation, in terms of sports card collecting, etc. So football fandom is really optimized for mainstream popularity. It's really optimized to be this thing that we do once a week, maybe twice a week. We think about it Saturday night. We set our fantasy lineups. Maybe we do some waiver wire stuff. So that would be my big pushback there. Is like, yeah, is the Super Bowl going to get 120 million viewers per Nielsen? And that's just going to completely dwarf the Stanley Cup and the NBA Finals, which are going to get 10 to 15 million? Yes. But how many of those fans are passionate diehard fans whose commitment to that sport would translate into something like collecting, which really lives and dies with authenticity?
Yeah, great points. And I think the line that comes to me, and you kind of framed that as pushing back a bit, but I wasn't pushing any. I was like, what does it mean? You remember I said, like, what does this mean? Anything? I don't even know if it means anything. But what I get from what you're saying, and I don't know if this makes sense or not, again, but it's like less is more. You have a whole week to study the lineups. You have a whole week to look at the matchups. Each game means that much more because there's only 17 of them a year. Like, really, you think so many hockey fans love hockey, but they don't watch until the playoffs start. That's not the same as football. They watch every single minute and play and drive of every single game. It's not the same in basketball. In hockey, baseball, 160. For me, that's the way baseball goes. I don't really take an interest until the playoffs. And basketball, a little bit in the regular season. There, I take a big interest in the finals. That's when I will sit down and watch some games from start to finish. So in football, I think, maybe the other point you made that I think really hits home for me is that it is like, and Joe said it too, it kind of is like the national pastime. I know baseball is America's pastime, but football is America's passion. I mean, and it leaks up into Canada too, by the way. I've said this before on the show. Like Canada, NFL is huge up here. We have the CFL. I couldn't even tell you how many teams were in the league anymore. Like I pay zero. There's a team where I live now. There's a team where I come from. No interest whatsoever from me. NFL is a monster. So I think I'm glad we're having the conversation, because what I'm kind of landing on now is that, and I wasn't saying before that it did matter that there were, so I was saying, what doesn't matter? And I think it matters that there's only 16 games. I think it matters for the positive, to the benefit of the collectability of the players, because every game is a humongous event. And you can't find that in any other sport except like, the Masters, let's say, or the PGA Tour. You're not finding that. F1, how many races do they have a year? Not that, I don't know the answer, but it's not that many. But that you get one a week, just like football, and that's it. And each one is a magnificent event. So I'll stop there. Who wants to opine on this and kind of jump in with thought? Joe or Ben? Who's got something on the tip of your tongue?
Ben.
Yeah, I'll just jump in. I think Chris and Joe hit the nail on the head.
What about me? I didn't.
Jeremy, I mean specifically with the kind of exclusivity of the NFL. Like they've perfectly crafted it to where it's an event, like Joe said, every single week. Like, are there people that watch the Yankees or the Lakers every night during the regular season? Of course there is, but it's not a national event where you would gather, like people aren't gathering with their family and friends every single night, having house parties to come watch regular season baseball and basketball games. But they will do that every single week for football because it's just one single day a week. So I do completely agree with that. And if the NFL expands and they keep adding more and more and more, like I do think that would hinder it, but how they have it right now, I think is perfect.
Yeah. How about you, Joe?
Well, I'm kind of in the zone of being excited for the draft next week. And I don't know if Ben had any thoughts on that. I mean, Shedeur Sanders or anyone else in terms of Cam Ward or any of the position players. It is in my mind, and this gets back to sort of the conversation I have with myself around collecting, is like, why do we so very much limit ourselves to quarterback and then maybe wide receiver and running back in football? But it is, I mean, if you truly love just collecting, there are so many elements of opportunity out there for meaningful, impactful, a la Aaron Donald, Laviska Shenault. I mean, depending on your team and what you find interesting in football. But Ben, do you got any bold predictions for the draft? If you were a GM, like where are you at? Are you questioning any evaluations, or are you doubling down on any prospects that you think might be overlooked in the greater perspective of the ESPN mock drafts and all?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a great NFL draft, and I think that the term generational is like so overused nowadays. Like it's just such a hot button word that it gets overused constantly. But I do believe there are two generational football prospects in this draft, one being Travis Hunter, who is the best wide receiver in this class, and he's never fully focused on playing receiver. And he's also going to play, I don't know how much he's going to play on defense, probably just third downs, but he's going to play both ways. I do believe that in the NFL. And then at running back, Ashton Genty is so good. He's so good that if you look at the college stats from last year, he led the country in rushing yards, and the second leading rusher in the country would have been Ashton Genty if you just took his yards after first contact. So that's how good Ashton Genty is. He's going to be amazing. They didn't throw him the ball much in college to where they will use him like that in the NFL. I told you guys on one of my first streams that LaDainian Tomlinson was my favorite football player ever, and I can't believe that would ever compare someone to LaDainian Tomlinson, but that is probably would be my comparison for Ashton Genty. And he's probably going to get drafted to a big market team in Las Vegas at the 6th spot. So that's something to look forward to, but I'm really excited for the draft. I think there's a lot of good running back prospects. Like I said, I think it's going to be really fun, especially for fantasy for the upcoming season. There's a lot of guys that you'll be picking, I think, that are rookies.
That's always fun.
Nice.
Joe, how does that sound to you?
Oh, exciting. Yeah. The Genty I saw, I think, in a bowl game. But I don't follow college football as much as I used to, but let's throw it over to HOJ, because I think he's probably got more perspectives on this, and want to hear his voice a little bit.
I'm thrilled for a generational rookie class. I think I thought Ben's observation that two of the more analytically advanced NFL teams, which perform well every year, are the Philadelphia Eagles and Baltimore Ravens, and they optimized in their off seasons to handpick high-performing running backs to sort of complement their status as contenders. I think that's a fascinating observation. And, the resurgence of the running back position, in my opinion, is a very welcome change. I've always admired the running back position. Joe, I thought it was a really cool sort of anecdote when you broke down how, from your football playing experience, the running back position was the position where the most talented athlete went to play. That's how it was like when I was growing up too. The best athlete in my high school played running back. So, it's a really exciting position, and it lost a lot of cachet lately. And then the dual threat running back emerged, or reemerged, I should say, because Tomlinson and before him Marshall Faulk and guys like that were doing it too. But I don't know, man. I'm very, very excited for this draft. But you know what, though, Joe? I got to be completely honest. I also couldn't care less about this draft right now because it's NBA playoff time. I watched about 10 hours of basketball today. So just tell me who got drafted at the end of June.
But let me watch my basketball playoffs in the meantime. Yeah.
Well, I'll pique Chris's attention here. We at least want some offensive linemen that can open some holes for McCaffrey, right? Like that much you should care about.
Yeah, great. That's great. Let's get somebody was talking about, I think it was Jim Harbaugh has some quote about, my brother was telling me about this quote like last season, just build the offensive line and then build everything from there. Like the offensive line is the only position group that doesn't rely on another position group to do its job. It's the core, it's the foundation, it's the essence of offensive success. So just draft nothing but OL. Let's take 5 swings at the OL and let's just beef that thing up.
100.
All right, let's run to a few comments here, guys. First, Bob Boozle said, I would build a spreadsheet with running backs in years 1 to 3 that are on a trajectory to catch these veterans' stats and cross-reference that list with the cheapest rookie cards and autos. That'd be an interesting study for sure. Otani PSA 10 says, I started picking up 90s Emmitt Smith inserts because he's too cheap. Usually I pay $30 to $120 for Skybox inserts with sub 10 pop. There's 2 things I say to that, Otani PSA 10. One is like, good on you. You're finding what you can perceive to be value. And that's awesome. That's what the hobby should be about. Buying cards that you like, that you can also think maybe I'm getting good value by here. That might provide you some financial rewards at the end of the day. And collecting isn't just about having the cards when you die. A lot of people want to see a return when they ultimately dispose of them. So that's good. The other thing I'll say though is that, and this is the other side of it, is that and I'm not saying you are, but just you might be buying the wrong cards. Like just like not all players are as popular as others, not all cards are as popular as others too. And those cards, while hopefully you love them, that may not be like a savvy play. It may be a hobby, enjoyment play, which is as if not more important. But if we're talking about, return on investment potential, I think some people are, then maybe it's not the right play. But I love that you're doing it nonetheless. Michael Stone said, but Brady sells for more than all those guys. I think it was the Rice and the Sanders and the Elway Elway and Marino and all these guys. And he does sell for more than all those guys, just like Jordan sells for more than everybody in basketball. And we have, Gretzky and hockey, etc. The GOATs are still the GOATs. And Bob Boozle says the NFL is a mechanism to drink beer. It's like we were at dinner tonight. I was saying earlier for my mother's birthday, and my kids had cupcakes, and they're just eating the icing off the top of the cupcake. I said the cake part's just the vessel for the icing. I think what Bob Boozle is saying is that the NFL is just the vessel to drink beer. And let's face it, the NFL did kind of, along with the Spuds McKenzie thing way back in the day with Bud Light being one of the first big advertisers on the Super Bowl, beer is definitely tied right into the NFL. And then David Chase says, will young collector, and this is a big question, will the young collectors ever care about vintage football, or did the rule changes hurt the stats of the past? I think this is a multi-level question and not one I think we're going to be able to do real justice on tonight, but I will just say that the answer is yes and no. I'll put it back on the screen to the detriment of Ben and HOJ's mugs right now, but the answer is yes and no. Some will, because there are always new young collectors coming into the hobby who are going to care about the history of the game. The rules have changed in every sport, not just football, and they've evolved. Yet, if you want to collect history, which a lot of us collectors do, even young ones who are not just flippers, not just into group breaks, not just chasing the hit, but actually care about the hobby, they will care about the past, I believe. Now, it's not going to be all of them, because we know there's a lot that only care about the money. We know that. But those people, won't be around as long as the ones who actually carry the hobby into the future generations in terms of the history of the hobby, not the next product coming out, but the history of the hobby. So I think that, to David's question again, I think some will, some won't. And I don't think that the rule changes really make much of a difference to those kinds of hobbyists who really just want to collect the history of the sport that they love. Michael Stone says, you hope I'm right. Michael, I think I am right. I think about a guy like Ryan Nolan, Breakout Sports. He was, when he started in the hobby on YouTube 5 years ago, came on Sports Cards Live with me. And then, then he blew up. Like, that was early on when he came on the first time. He's into vintage, like 1800s, early 1900s. He might be, I don't know if he's 27 years old right now. But there are young people that are into vintage and the history of the sport and the pioneers, like Josh talked about earlier when he was on, about looking at all the Hall of Famers. Like, the Hall of Fame is important. Someone was talking about all the running backs at like Marshall Faulk, who he says, Carlos says Adrian Peterson, who also mentioned LaDainian Tomlinson. Add that to the list of forgotten running backs. Question: are those three guys in the Hall of Fame? Like, I don't know. Does anyone know if those three guys, like Marshall Faulk, LaDainian Tomlinson, Adrian Peterson, if not, they're gonna be, right? I think they are. Point being that they might be forgotten because right now all the attention is on Mahomes and McCaffrey and Tom Brady, but those guys are still collected, believe it or not. You're just not seeing it as much on Instagram. And if they're in the Hall of Fame, they will always be collected to a degree. So there might be less focus on them now, but they're not forgotten. They're just not forgotten. So AP not yet eligible, but he'll be in, right? LaDainian Tomlinson's, he's got to be in by now, right?
He's in, yeah.
Yeah. So
all three of those guys are league MVPs.
Yeah, like if we only could collect Mahomes and Brady and maybe McCaffrey, if he's the leading running back right now, well, great, but pretty boring hobby if we all collect the exact same thing. And the fact is that there's thousands and thousands and thousands of people in this hobby, and they collect. Everyone does it different. So
Jeremy,
you might not see them getting the all-time high headlines or that kind of thing like you will with some other players. But I'll tell you what, don't discount these players. Go to a card show and you know, you'll see people asking. You listen, people are asking for these players. Chris?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I completely agree. I think there's a natural evolution that I experienced as I got deeper to collecting football, which is like, obviously I was captivated by the players of this era, but then as I get more interested in them, I want to find out how these players measure up against the all-time greats. And when you're looking at running backs, you inevitably run into Barry Sanders and Emmitt Smith and LaDainian Tomlinson and Marshall Faulk and Adrian Peterson for sure. But then you even start running up against Walter Payton and Jim Brown, 3-time MVP Jim Brown. Now, let me tell you a little something about Jim Brown's cards to the original question asker's point. So Jim Brown's 1958 Topps has 6 PSA 9 copies, and it sold twice. And both of those sales publicly, both those sales happened in 2016 and 2017, and it sold for about $350,000 in each instance. The card ladder value on that card now, which is based on the movement in Jim Brown's index since then, which is 8 or 9 years ago, just under $1 million for that card. That's the estimate of what that card worth, and there's 6 of them. So these Mount Rushmore guys at their positions, like a Jim Brown, he probably has $6 million cards, at least those 6 copies. So I think absolutely there's going to be a healthy hobby respect for the Mount Rushmores of the prominent positions.
Some of the most popular cards are still to this day Ty Cobb's, Christy Mathewson, Cy Young's, Honus Wagner's, Joe Jackson's, George Vezina's, Art Ross's. You can't go that far back in basketball and football as you can in hockey and baseball. But, you Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain, and of course, the guys you just mentioned for the Jim Browns and the Walter Paytons and the Joe Namaths, and I mean, going to other positions and stuff. But yeah, like the history is always going to be collectible of this, of all these major sports that are so ingrained in culture. And I think Iowa Dave said it really well earlier on in the show as he was talking along those lines. But yeah, it's a case where we are so Instagram particularly is such tunnel vision in a way. It doesn't give you the full breadth of what's going on out there. And I'm not saying that anyone's coming from the Instagram perspective here, but the history of the game is always going to be collected, I think. Now, I also do think though that 100 years from now, maybe no one's going to care about Joe Namath. Maybe no one's going to care about Emmitt Smith. That's 100 years from now, I don't know. I'm just kind of like, this could just keep on going. This could just keep on going. So I'll just stop it there. Any other comments from anybody? We're coming up on 3.5 hours, so we're gonna wrap this up.
I have one final comment. It's a conversation for another day. Like, that's not why we're here, but I just have to address it because I always love coming on this stream because I love the chat. They're super active. I love to read what they're saying. For my friend Carlo in the chat, Patrick Mahomes is already the best quarterback ever. I'm sorry to break that news to you, but yeah.
And I mean, pushback you're going to get on that will be, well, what about Tom Brady with his 7 rings? And you're going to get that. So how do you justify that, Ben?
Tom Brady did not win his 4th Super Bowl until he was 37 years old. Patrick Mahomes has 3. He's 29. He's played in the AFC Championship game or the Super Bowl in every single year of being a starting quarterback. The Kansas City Chiefs are obviously one of the best teams in the league. So do you think what would the odds be that he doesn't win another one in the next 8 years, right? I would say they're probably pretty low because if you're just picking out forecasting potential Super Bowl champions, the Chiefs are going to be at the top of the list as long as he's starting there. So I would say it's unlikely he doesn't win another one by the time he's 37 years old.
Do the stats. So we're talking Super Bowls there, but what about performance statistics?
Oh, yes. Stats. I mean, his stats have come down the last 2 years, which I also saw Carlo mention that his skills are diminishing. I don't think that his skills are diminishing. I think that kind of what I said, NFL defenses adjust constantly. They've adjusted to the Chiefs. We've never, too high safety was not a thing as much as it is now 5 years ago. Like, teams have completely changed how they defend him. They're not going to let you throw the ball deep against them. They'll just let you, dink and dunk. And we've seen Travis Kelce, his skills have definitely diminished because he's old. So that affects things. But I don't think his skills have diminished. But I mean, go back and look at Tom Brady's early career stats. They weren't very good. He had a great defense. Like, he wasn't necessarily putting up crazy passing numbers. So.
All right. Appreciate the further insight. Joe, you want to give some final thoughts to the evening?
Yeah, just had fun talking about it. I'm kind of in my own headspace around what I might, just the opportunities in football, a sport I love, and just kind of still pondering some of the conversations that we're having, just kind of in integrating them in. And thanks, Captain Picard, for navigating the ship tonight and moving us through the universe in the skillful ways that you do.
To play on my lack of my hair challenged head. Is that what that was?
I mean, there's a general likeness. I don't know, but a leadership capacity. Yeah.
I still prefer the Warren Spahn lookalike association that I've been known to be called out for, which I did some research into Warren Spahn recently, and my goodness, what a career that guy had. Unbelievable. I'm proud to be mistaken for him at times, I guess. I know always gets a good chuckle out of Chris. Laura, nice comment. Jeremy, an honored guest. Another fantastic, educational, thought-provoking show. Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Laura, for that. Chris, how about you? Final thoughts?
Yeah, final thought is this. I didn't overlap tonight with any literary references from Joe, but I got something that was pretty close, which was a Laviska Shenault reference, which if you would ask me to name 500 NFL players who would have been mentioned tonight, he probably would not have made the top 500 list. Laviska Shenault. Thank you very much. Great show, Jeremy.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much for joining us. Same with you, Ben. Thanks for being here. You got your final comment in, but thank you so much to you guys. For Ben, if you are interested in checking out Rolling Insights, rolling-insights.com, you can build your own data spaces and use them for your fantasy. If you want to integrate them into card collecting, that is great too. I think we made some good arguments for that for sure. Thank you, Michael Stone, Bob Boozle, LGC, Carlo, Vintage, Mr. Manos, Stale Prod, Foul Ball, Stone Collector, Skeppy. I'm just scrolling up. Rock Latex. I see you there. Lantern. Thank you very much, guys. Everybody, for joining us tonight. Again, I will be back tomorrow for the Fanatics Collect weekly auction covering all sports. Monday night is MC Monday's showcase. Tons of action on that show. A lot of fun where we'll cover about 50 to 60 cards that end about a minute apart on eBay. It's a ton of fun as those bids come in and I start yelling and screaming about it, getting all worked up. And then Thursday night is the Fanatics premiere show. I will be on that with Adam after I'm done at the event that I'm hosting at the Sport Card Expo. No shows next week on the channel, guys. Next weekend, I should say, as I will be in Toronto for the Expo, but we will be back the week after that. And with that, for April the 19th, 2025, thank you, everybody, for joining us. This episode of Sports Cards Live is now
over.
And
it's over. I got to add in there. See, I practiced that for you, Jeremy.
Do it one more time, Ben.
Over.
And Christina says it is over. Good night, everybody. Thank you for joining us.